It's mine. The man had barely finished speaking when he reached out fast, snatched the ticket from her hand, and slipped it into the inside pocket of his coat, as casually as if he were picking up something he had dropped. Annie froze. Her hand was still raised in midair. Her fingertips trembled in the empty space where the ticket had been only 1 second earlier. "No," she whispered. Then her voice tightened with fear. "No, sir. It's mine. That ticket is mine. Please. I just paid for it." The man did not even bother to look at her. He pulled out his wallet, took out a crisp $50 bill, and tossed it onto the counter in front of the store owner. "Keep the change," he said coldly. "Keep the rest." Mr. Patel, the owner of Maple Corner Grocery, blinked at the money. In an instant, his expression changed completely. A few seconds earlier, he had looked tired and cautious. Now his mouth spread into a wide, eager smile. "Oh, sir, very generous," he said, quickly reaching for the bill. "Very generous, Mr. Whitmore." "Thank you, sir. Thank you very much." Annie turned to him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Mr. Patel," she said softly, "you saw it. I gave you the money. You handed that ticket to me." Near the register, a man buying cigarettes paused. His hand remained near his wallet as his eyes moved from Annie to the man in the gray suit. But Mr. Patel did not answer. Annie stood in the middle of that small store in her faded diner uniform. Her sleeves still smelled of dishwater. Her old shoes were still damp from the rain outside. "Please, sir," Annie said, looking at the man in the gray suit. "Give me back my ticket. I bought it with my own money." At last, Richard Whitmore turned his head. There was no anger on his face, only a cold irritation, as if Annie were nothing more than a small obstacle slowing down his evening. "You paid $1.30, he said. "Yes, sir." Richard gave a quiet laugh. "And I just paid $50. Annie swallowed hard. "But that doesn't make it right." Richard glanced at Mr. Patel. $1.30 versus $50, he said. "Tell me, Mr. Patel, which one sounds more reasonable?" Mr. Patel was already holding the bill in his hand. He pinched it between two fingers, raised it close to his face, wet his thumb, and ran it along the edge of the paper. Then he counted it once, and then counted it again, even though it was only a single bill. Finally, he folded it carefully and tucked it deep into his shirt pocket. A hoarse little laugh escaped him. Yes, he said. $50 is much better. Very fair. More than fair." Annie looked at him, her throat tightening. "But I was here first," she said. Her lips trembled. Tears had filled her eyes, but she fought to keep them from falling. "I gave you the money first. You gave me the ticket. It was already in my hand." Mr. Patel bent down under the cash register, opened the drawer, and took out the exact money Annie had just paid. 1 crumpled dollar bill, 1 quarter, 1 nickel. He placed them on the counter and pushed them toward her. "Take it," he said, avoiding her eyes. "Take your $1.30 and go home. That ticket has an owner now." Annie did not touch the money. For a moment, every sound in the store seemed to disappear. All she could hear was her mother's cough echoing in her memory. That dry, painful cough that had gone on all night. The medicine bottle on the kitchen table was almost empty. Their savings were nearly gone. Annie's paycheck was still days away. That $1.30 was all she had left in her pocket. At first, she had meant to buy a can of soup, but then she saw the small cardboard sign taped beside the register. "Lucky scratch-off ticket, grand prize, $5 million. Price, $1.30. Mr. Patel had said, "Last one." So Annie had placed every last coin she owned on the counter. $1, 1 quarter, 1 nickel, and now that money was being pushed back to her as if she were the one who had made a mistake. As if a transaction could be erased simply because a richer man had walked in after her. "Please," Annie said again, her voice softer this time. "Mr. Whitmore, you don't understand. I need that ticket." Richard adjusted the lapel of his coat. "Need does not determine ownership." "This isn't ownership," Annie said. "You ripped it out of my hand." Richard reached into his coat and took the ticket out again. He held it up high enough for Annie to see the silver-printed boxes, the QR code, and the small serial number along the bottom edge. He smiled, the kind of smile worn by a man who believed he was teaching someone weaker, a necessary lesson. "First," he said, tapping the edge of the ticket, "your name is not written on this. Second, In places like this, the person with more money usually gets to decide. Learn to accept reality, little girl. Annie's face tightened for half a second, but she forced herself to stand straight. She stepped forward, reaching for the ticket. Please don't. Richard pulled his hand back before she could touch it, then slipped the ticket into his pocket again. That's enough, he said. Annie stood there with empty hands. Beside her on the counter lay the crumpled dollar bill and the 2 small coins, sitting silently under the cold store lights. The man buying cigarettes cleared his throat. He was middle-aged, wearing a faded Browns cap and a work jacket with dried paint on the cuffs. Come on, man, he said to Richard. She's telling the truth. I saw that ticket in her hand. You don't have to treat her like that. Richard turned slightly. Did anyone ask for your opinion? The man hesitated. I'm just saying, he muttered. This isn't right. Richard looked at him with icy eyes. Then buy your cigarettes, and keep your voice down. The man looked at Annie. Shame was written plainly across his face. I'm sorry, miss. Annie gave him only a small nod. She no longer had the strength to thank or comfort anyone. She turned back to Richard. Sir, please help me. That was everything I had. You got your money back, Richard said. I don't want to repeat myself a 4th time. My money isn't leaving with you, Annie replied, her voice shaking but clear. But my ticket is. Mr. Patel immediately raised both hands. Please, no trouble. Do not make a scene in my store. Annie looked straight at him. Then fix it. But Mr. Patel's hand stayed close to his shirt pocket, where the $50 bill was hidden safely away. Richard turned and walked toward the door. Annie hurried after him, her voice breaking with desperation. Please don't do this. My mother is sick. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just want back what I paid for. He did not stop. The bell above the door rang sharply as Richard stepped out into the damp Cleveland night. Annie followed him onto the sidewalk. A black car was already waiting by the curb, its engine running softly. The driver quickly opened the rear door. Richard got into the car without another word. Annie stood there helplessly, watching the door close between them. The car rolled away, its red taillights stretched across the wet street, staining the puddles the color of a warning that had come too late. Behind her, Maple Corner Grocery still glowed beneath its flickering lights. Inside, her $1.30 still lay on the counter, cold and meaningless. Annie stood still for a long moment. Then her hand slowly slipped into her coat pocket, searching for her old phone. Her fingertips touched the cracked screen. And in that exact moment, she remembered. Before Richard had walked in, she had taken a picture. The ticket, the serial number, the QR code. Annie looked down at the phone screen. A very small breath escaped her lips. Annie stood silently outside Maple Corner Grocery, clutching her old phone in her hand. Her breath caught somewhere between fear, anger, and a fragile little piece of hope she did not yet dare to name. The corner of the screen had been cracked for a long time. The battery icon glowed red like a warning, but the photo was still there. The ticket filled almost the entire frame. The QR code was clear. The serial number was clear. Even the edge of her thumb appeared at the bottom corner of the ticket, captured at the very moment she had been holding it, just before Richard Whitmore ripped it away. For a few seconds, Annie wanted to storm back into the store, shove the phone screen in Mr. Patel's face, and force him to say the truth out loud. She wanted him to look at the $1.30 still lying on the counter and admit that he had sold his honesty for a $50 bill. But before she could move, her phone vibrated. Mum, Annie answered so quickly she nearly dropped it. Yes, Mama. Linda Carter's voice came through weakly on the other end, thin and tired, like a lamp running out of oil. Annie, are you on your way home? Yes, I'm almost done. Why does your voice sound strange? Annie closed her eyes. She could not tell her mother what had just happened, not while Linda was home alone, trying to survive another painful evening. I'm okay, Annie said, just tired from my shift. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then a cough broke through. It was deep and dry, so painful that Annie pressed the phone harder against her ear, as if she could somehow take some of that pain for her mother. Don't stop anywhere else unless you have to, Linda said when she could finally breathe again. Come home, baby. Yes, I'm coming home now. Annie? Yes, Mama? If there's still something in the cabinet we can make last through tonight, don't spend that money. Annie looked through the store window. Her $1.30 still lay on the counter near the cash register. Small, cold, useless, like a witness that knew the truth. But no one wanted to hear its testimony. "I won't spend it," she said softly. She hung up and slipped the phone into her coat pocket. Through the glass, Mr. Patel was pretending to rearrange packs of gum and boxes of mints near the counter. He did not look toward the door. The man in the brown's cap had left his cigarettes on the counter and was walking out with his head lowered. As he passed Annie, he glanced at her once. There was regret in his eyes, but regret could not put the ticket back into her hand. Annie went back inside, took her $1.30, and quietly left the store. She crossed the rain-wet street toward the old brick building where she and her mother lived above a laundromat. Their hallway always smelled of laundry detergent, warm dryer air, and the damp scent of old wood. Annie walked past the machines turning steadily below, then climbed to the second floor. One hand held the railing. The other rested on her coat pocket, where her phone still sat with the only photo that could prove the truth. Inside the apartment, the heater clicked and rattled but barely gave off any warmth. The living room lamp cast a pale yellow light over everything, making the whole room look tired. Linda was sitting on the sofa with an old blanket wrapped around her shoulders. On the small table in front of her sat an empty paper pharmacy bag, folded flat. Beside it were three things Annie had begun to hate seeing: the electric bill, the rent envelope, and the orange medicine bottle with only 2 pills left inside. Linda looked up. She was only 43. But illness made her face look much older in the evenings. Her hair was wrapped neatly in a scarf. Her eyes were still gentle, even though her body was exhausted. "You didn't get the soup?" Linda asked. Annie stood near the door for 1 second too long. "They were out of the kind you like." Linda looked at her for a long moment. Annie took off her coat and hung it over the back of a chair. "I'll toast some bread. There are only 2 slices left. You can have them. I asked if you ate at work." "I ate something." Linda pressed her lips together. She recognized that lie. She had told the same kind of lie for years when Annie was little. Back then, Linda worked in the laundry room at St. Catherine's Medical Center, coming home every night smelling of bleach, steam, and clean folded sheets. Annie used to ask if she had eaten, and Linda would always smile and say, "A little." Most of the time, "a little" meant cold coffee and a few broken crackers from the pocket of her uniform. "Come here," Linda said. Annie crossed the room and sat on the edge of the sofa. Linda reached out and took her daughter's hand. Her fingers were warm, but heartbreakingly weak. "What happened?" Annie shook her head too quickly. "Nothing, Mama. Don't do that to me." "Mama, please." Linda said nothing more. She simply waited. She had never needed to raise her voice to make Annie tell the truth. Annie looked down at the floor. The carpet near the sofa was worn so thin that the fabric beneath it showed through. A small stack of mail sat under the table, where Annie had shoved it after the numbers inside the envelopes began to feel like they were aimed directly at her. "I stopped by Maple Corner," Annie said. "For soup?" Annie nodded, then swallowed hard. "I saw a bingo ticket. It cost exactly $1.30. Linda's hand tightened gently around hers. Not out of anger, out of fear. "I know," Annie said quickly. "I know how it sounds. I was going to walk away. I really was. I had already put the money back in my pocket, but Mr. Patel said it was the last one, and I just..." Her voice faded. "I just thought maybe, for once, luck might stand on our side." Linda closed her eyes for a moment. Annie hurried on, as if afraid that if she stopped, she would start crying. "I paid for it. He handed it to me. I even took a picture because I saw online that people should keep the ticket number." Then a man walked in. Richard Whitmore, the man from the newspapers, that wealthy real estate investor. He wanted to buy the ticket. When Mr. Patel said I had bought the last one, he ripped it right out of my hand. Linda opened her eyes. "He ripped it out of your hand?" "Yes." "And the store owner let him do that?" Annie nodded. Her eyes burned now, and not only from tears. "He gave Mr. Patel $50. Mr. Patel kept the money. Then he gave me back my $1.30 and told me to go home." Linda's face changed. "Did you ask for it back?" "I did. I begged him. I told him you were sick." Annie wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "He said if I had so little money, I shouldn't be gambling with it." If Annie's story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a comment telling us where you are watching from, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories about truth, courage, and justice. The room fell silent. Outside the window, A bus passed through the corner. Its brakes screamed into the night. Downstairs, a dryer door slammed shut. After a long while, Linda said, "When people look down on you, never let them take your dignity too." A shaky breath escaped Annie. "Mama, I tried. I tried to stand there, but he made me feel so small." "You are not small." He had a private car, a driver waiting for him. Mr. Patel smiled the second he saw that $50 bill. Everyone saw what happened, but no one stopped him. Linda lifted Annie's chin with 2 fingers. "Listen to me. A man with money can make other people go quiet, but that does not mean he is right." Annie reached into her coat pocket and took out her phone. "I still have the photo." Linda looked down at the cracked screen. Annie opened the picture again and turned the phone toward her mother. The ticket appeared clearly under the weak light in the room. The QR code. The serial number. Even the time stamp at the top of the screen. For the first time that night, Linda's tired eyes became sharp. "This is the ticket?" "Yes." "You said it has a QR code?" Annie nodded. "I think the app can scan it." Linda looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she coughed softly, placed a hand on her chest, and tried to catch her breath. When she looked up again, her voice was still weak, but her eyes were strangely firm. "Then why are you still sitting here crying?" Annie blinked. "What?" Linda squeezed her hand. "Baby," she said slowly, "if the truth is already in your hand, don't let it sleep there." Annie looked down at the phone in her hand. The picture seemed ordinary now that it was lying in the quiet of their apartment. Just a lottery-style bingo card on a cracked screen, a small square of black and white code in one corner, a row of numbers along the bottom. But Linda's words changed the weight of it. "If the truth is in your hand, don't leave it sleeping there." "I don't know if it'll work from a picture," Annie said. "Then find out." "The battery's low. Plug it in." Annie moved fast, almost too fast, as if motion could outrun fear. She grabbed the charging cord from beside the couch, plugged the phone into the wall, and sat on the floor near the outlet because the cord was short and frayed at the end. The screen showed 7% now. She wiped her thumb across it, opened the App Store, then stopped. "I don't even know which app." Linda reached for her reading glasses from the side table. "What does the card say?" Annie zoomed in on the photo. "Lucky Bingo Scratch." "It says official scan available through the Ohio Prize Check app." "Then that's the one." Annie searched for it. The little circle spun. The apartment felt too quiet while the app downloaded. Linda tried to hide another cough by turning her head into the blanket. But Annie heard it. She heard everything now. The radiator ticking. The hum from the laundromat below. A car door closing out on the street. The tiny sound of her own breathing. "What if he already scanned it?" Annie said. Linda looked at her. "Did he know there was a picture?" "No." "Did he know you had the code?" "No." "Then don't give him more power than he already stole." The app finally opened. It asked for permission to use the camera. Annie allowed it, then realized she could not scan the code from the same phone while the photo was on the screen. "Oh no," she whispered. "What?" "I can't scan a picture that's on this phone. The camera needs something in front of it." Linda pushed herself up a little, wincing. "Use my phone." "Mama, your phone barely works. It calls people. It shows pictures. That's enough." Annie took Linda's old phone from the table. The case was cracked at one corner, and the screen had a pale line running down the middle. But it turned on. Annie sent the photo to Linda's phone, waiting while the image loaded slowly over the weak apartment Wi-Fi. The first attempt failed. The second froze halfway. On the third, the photo came through. Annie placed Linda's phone flat on the coffee table with the bingo ticket picture open. She held her own phone above it, trying to line up the QR code inside the little scanning box. Her hands shook so badly the image kept slipping out of frame. "I can't keep it still," she said. Linda reached out. "Give me the other phone." "Mama, you don't have to." "Give it to me, Annie." Linda held her phone with both hands. They were thin hands. Hands that had folded hospital sheets for years. Hands that had washed uniforms, packed lunches, smoothed Annie's hair before school, counted medicine, counted bills, counted days until payday. Now those hands held the picture steady while Annie brought her phone over it. The app beeped. Annie stopped breathing. A white screen loaded first. Then a gray wheel turned in the middle. Once, twice. The phone seemed to take forever, as if even the internet had to think about whether a girl like Annie was allowed this much hope. Then the words appeared. Congratulations. Annie blinked. The letters did not change. Linda leaned forward. What does it say? Annie's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She scrolled down with her thumb. Grand prize winner, $5 million. The room tilted without moving. Annie lowered the phone, then raised it again, because she thought maybe her eyes had put the words there out of need. They were still there. $5 million. Not 500. Not 5,000. 5 million. Linda whispered, Lord have mercy. Annie pressed one hand over her mouth. A sound escaped anyway. Small and broken. She was not laughing. She was not crying. Not exactly. It was something in between. Something the body makes when it cannot hold a number that large beside a life that small. Mama, she said, and then she could not finish. Linda stared at the screen. Her eyes filled slowly, but she did not reach for the money in her mind. Annie knew that look. Linda was not seeing a fancy car or a new coat or the kind of house people showed off online. She was seeing a doctor's office, a pharmacy counter, a clean room with heat that worked, a refrigerator with food that did not need to be stretched into 3 meals. Read the rest, Linda said. Annie scrolled. Her heart was beating too hard now. Ticket registered to first verified scan. Below it, a button said, Continue claimant registration. Annie looked up. It says, first verified scan. Then keep going. What if I do something wrong? Read each line. Go slow. The app asked for her name. Annie typed. Annie Carter. It asked for date of birth, phone number, email, and home address. She entered each piece carefully, checking twice before pressing next. When it asked whether she was in possession of the physical ticket, her finger froze. Linda saw her stop. What does it ask? Annie swallowed. It asks if I have the paper ticket. Linda's face hardened. No, but you have the purchase proof in the scan. Don't lie. Tell the truth. Annie selected. No. A text box opened asking for explanation. Annie stared at the blank space. How did a person fit humiliation into a little box? How did she explain the feel of Richard Whitmore's hand taking the card? Mr. Patel's smile, the $50 bill disappearing into a pocket, her own voice begging in front of strangers. She typed slowly. I purchased the ticket at Maple Corner Grocery for $1.30. I took this photo before the ticket was taken from my hand by another customer. The store owner and witnesses were present. I am registering the scan immediately. She read it to Linda. Good, Linda said. Plain truth doesn't need decorations. Annie hit submit. The screen loaded again. This time, the wait felt longer. Her phone battery stayed at 7% even though it was plugged in, and for one terrible second, Annie imagined the screen going black before the claim finished. She held the cord in place with one hand and the phone with the other. Then the final message appeared. Claimant registered, Annie Carter. A confirmation number followed. Annie took a screenshot, then another. Then she sent it to Linda's phone, to her own email, and to the cheap cloud backup she barely knew how to use. She wrote the confirmation number on the back of an old envelope from the electric company, pressing so hard the pen nearly tore the paper. Linda let out a breath and leaned back against the couch. Her face was tired, but there was something new in it now. Not relief. Not yet. Relief would come when the medicine was paid for, when the bills stopped shouting, when no one could take the prize away. This was smaller and stronger. Proof. Annie sat back on her heels, looking at the confirmation number. He has the ticket, she said. Linda nodded. And you have the first claim. He'll come back. Probably. He'll say I stole it somehow. Maybe. He has lawyers. Linda reached for Annie's hand again. Then you get witnesses. You get the camera from the store. You write everything down while it's fresh. Names, times. What he said. What Mr. Patel did. What you paid. All of it. Annie looked at her mother, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. You sound like you've done this before. Linda's mouth curved, but there was no humor in it. I've been poor in America a long time, baby. You learn to keep receipts. Annie looked at the phone again. The words were still there. Claimant registered. Annie Carter. For the first time that night, her name looked stronger than Richard Whitmore's money. A knock came at the apartment door. Both women went still. Annie rose slowly, phone in hand. Who is it? A man's voice answered from the hallway, low and uneasy. It's Mr. Patel. Annie, please open. We need to talk. Annie kept one hand around her phone and looked at her mother. Linda shook her head once, not because she was afraid of Mr. Patel, but because she knew fear made people dangerous in small, ordinary ways. Ask him why, Linda said. Annie turned back to the door. What do you want? Mr. Patel's voice came through the wood, thin and rushed. Please, Annie. I made a mistake. I need to speak with you. You made it in front of everybody. I know. Please. Linda pushed herself up against the arm of the couch. Open it with the chain on. Annie crossed the room and slid the chain into place before turning the lock. When she opened the door a few inches, Mr. Patel stood in the hallway holding his knit cap in both hands. He looked smaller without the counter between them. His shoulders were hunched, and sweat shone along his hairline, though the hallway was cool. Behind him stood the man from the store who had been buying cigarettes, the one in the faded Brown's cap. He lifted one hand awkwardly. Evening, he said. Name's Earl. Earl Dawson. Annie did not answer him right away. Her eyes stayed on Mr. Patel. You shouldn't be here, she said. I know. Mr. Patel looked down the hallway, then back at her. Mr. Whitmore called the store. Linda's voice came from the couch. Let him talk, Annie. Annie opened the door a little wider but kept the chain on. What did he say? Mr. Patel swallowed. He asked if I remembered the sale clearly. He said perhaps I was confused. He said maybe you picked up the card before the sale was final. Annie felt the words hit her stomach. That's a lie. Yes. Mr. Patel said quickly. Yes. It is. Earl leaned against the wall, his jaw tight. He called while I was still there. Put it on speaker too. Like he wanted everybody to know whose voice was in the room. Mr. Patel's fingers twisted the edge of his cap. Then a lawyer called. He said if I make a statement against Mr. Whitmore, I could be pulled into a civil matter. He said my business license, my lease, my taxes, many things could be examined. Annie stared at him. So you came here to tell me you're scared? Mr. Patel lowered his head. Yes. The honesty surprised her more than an excuse would have. For a second she saw not the man who had taken the 50, but an aging store owner standing in a hallway after closing, afraid of a rich man's phone calls. It did not make what he had done right. It only made it human, and that almost hurt worse. Linda coughed from the couch. Annie glanced back, then opened the door, unhooked the chain, and let them in. The apartment looked even smaller with 2 extra people inside. Earl removed his cap as soon as he crossed the threshold. Ma'am, he said to Linda. Sorry to come by late. Linda nodded. Sit if you need to. Talk if you came to talk. Nobody sat. Mr. Patel looked at the orange pill bottle on the table, then away, ashamed. Annie, I should not have taken his money. No, Annie said. You shouldn't have. I saw you pay. I saw you hold the ticket. I know. Then why did you tell me it had a new owner? Mr. Patel pressed the cap against his chest. Because men like him do not ask. They decide. And I have spent 22 years trying to keep that little store open. My wife's medicine, my son's college loans, the lease going up every year. I saw $50 in a man who could ruin me, and I chose wrong. Earl gave a dry laugh. That's the cleanest way I ever heard somebody admit they folded. Mr. Patel nodded. I folded. Annie looked at him, her eyes wet again despite her effort. You didn't just fold. You pushed my own money back at me like I was begging for something I hadn't bought. I know, he said. Linda's voice was quiet but firm. An apology is not a receipt, Mr. Patel. What are you here to do? Mr. Patel reached into his jacket and pulled out a small white envelope. Annie stiffened, thinking it was money. He shook his head. Not cash. The store camera. I copied the last hour. Register view. Door view. Counter view. The angle is not perfect, but it shows enough. It shows Annie paying. It shows me handing the ticket to her. It shows Mr. Whitmore entering after. Annie took one step closer. You copied it? Yes, before I could lose courage. Earl lifted his chin. I told him if that footage disappeared, I'd be back at his store every morning asking why. Mr. Patel handed the envelope to Annie. Inside was a small USB drive and a folded receipt from Maple Corner Grocery. On the receipt, printed in faint ink, was the time, the item code, and the amount, $1.30. Annie held it with both hands. The receipt was thin, ordinary paper, the kind people threw away without thinking. Tonight, it felt heavier than Richard Whitmore's 50. I don't have the paper ticket, she said, but I scanned the picture. The app registered me first. Mr. Patel's eyes widened. It worked? Annie nodded and showed him the confirmation screen. Earl stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. 5 million, Earl said under his breath. Lord, Mr. Patel covered his mouth. He came back after winning? He called after, Annie said. My guess is he tried to enter the code and found out he was too late. Linda leaned back, tired but alert. That means he is not finished. No, Earl said. Men like that don't let go because truth asks nicely. Mr. Patel looked at Annie. You need to call the police. Annie's mouth tightened. And say what? A billionaire took my ticket, and the store owner sold me out for $50? Mr. Patel flinched but did not defend himself. Earl said, say exactly that, but with evidence. Linda pointed weakly toward the table. Write the timeline. Now. Before fear. Edits it. Annie pulled a notebook from under a stack of mail. It was the same notebook where she kept grocery totals and Linda's appointment dates. She turned to a clean page. Her hand shook over the pen. Earl spoke first. 7:40-something. I came in for cigarettes. 7:46, Mr. Patel said. The receipt says Annie's sale was 7:48. Annie wrote it down. Mr. Whitmore came in maybe 2 minutes later, Earl said. Asked for the bingo card. Patel said it was the last one, and you had bought it. Mr. Patel closed his eyes. Then he took it from your hand. Annie wrote that too. The words looked strange on paper. Took it from my hand. So plain. So small. Yet they held the whole wound. Linda watched her daughter write. Add what he said. Annie paused. What did he say? Earl asked. Annie's voice lowered. He said my name wasn't on the ticket. He said whoever had more money had the right to decide. He told me to accept reality. Earl's face hardened. Write every word. She did. Then Mr. Patel reached into his pocket and pulled out the $50 bill. It was folded twice, creased from where his hand had guarded it. He placed it on the table. I cannot keep this. Annie looked at it. Then at him. Mr. Patel said, it bought my shame for 1 hour. That is long enough. Linda gave him a tired look. Do not hand it to Annie. It is not hers. It is evidence. The room went quiet. Earl nodded. She's right. Put it in an envelope. Don't touch it more than you already did. Mr. Patel obeyed. Annie found an old utility envelope, and he slid the bill inside. She wrote on the front, $50 given by Richard Whitmore after taking ticket. For the first time since Richard had walked into Maple Corner Grocery, Annie felt the ground under her feet grow steadier. Not safe. Not yet. But steadier. The phone rang in Mr. Patel's pocket. He looked at the screen and went pale. Earl read his face. Whitmore? Mr. Patel nodded. No one spoke. The phone kept ringing. Linda looked at Annie. Answer it. Mr. Patel whispered. What? Linda's eyes did not move from her daughter. Put it on speaker. If a man wants to tell a lie, let him do it in a room full of people who know the truth. Mr. Patel's thumb hovered over the screen. The phone kept ringing in his hand, each buzz making the little apartment feel smaller. Annie stood beside the table with the notebook open, the USB drive near her elbow, the receipt beside it, and Richard Whitmore's $50 bill sealed inside an old utility envelope. Speaker, Linda said again. Mr. Patel's face had lost color. Mrs. Carter, if I answer and he knows I am here. He already knows you're scared, Linda said. That's why he keeps calling. Earl Dawson folded his arms. Put it on speaker, Patel. Don't say more than you have to. Annie did not speak. Her throat felt tight. but her phone was in her hand. Recording. She had started the voice memo the moment her mother told Mr. Patel to answer. The red timer moved quietly across the cracked screen. Mr. Patel pressed accept, then tapped speaker. Richard Whitmore's voice filled the room, calm and annoyed. "Why did it take you so long?" Mr. Patel swallowed. "I was closing the store." "At this hour?" "Yes, sir." A short pause. "Listen carefully. A young woman may come back asking about camera footage. If she does, you are to tell her the system was not recording tonight." Annie's fingers tightened around her phone. Mr. Patel glanced at Linda. Linda gave one small nod. "The cameras were working," Mr. Patel said. "I did not ask what was true." Richard replied, "I told you what to say." Earl's jaw flexed. Annie wrote the sentence down word for word. Mr. Patel's voice shook. "Mr. Whitmore, she bought the ticket first." Another pause, colder this time. "You took my $50. I should not have." "You think guilt makes you brave?" "No, sir." "Good. Then remember what makes you practical. Your lease renewal is coming up, isn't it? That little store sits in a building my company has been looking at for months. You want to keep selling milk and scratch cards on that corner. You will stop confusing yourself with a hero." Mr. Patel closed his eyes. Richard continued. "The girl spent pocket change on a gambling card. I paid you more than enough. If she wants attention, let her cry to someone else. Do not give her footage. Do not give her receipts. Do not put yourself in the middle of this." Annie felt something inside her go still. Not calm. Something harder than calm. Linda's voice came from the couch, clear despite the sickness in it. "Too late." "Silence." Richard's voice sharpened. "Who is that?" Linda looked at Mr. Patel, then at the phone. A woman who heard enough. Mr. Patel panicked and reached to end the call, but Earl caught his wrist. Richard said, "Mr. Patel, where are you?" No one answered. Annie stepped closer to the phone. Her voice was soft, but it did not break. "You took my ticket from my hand." Richard gave a low laugh. "Miss Carter, I was wondering when you would find someone to perform for." "I'm not performing." "No? Then why are there people around you?" "Because you made sure I needed witnesses. That card is in my possession. The scan is in my name." This time the silence lasted longer. When Richard spoke again, the smoothness had thinned. "You have no idea what you're doing. I know I paid $1.30. I know Mr. Patel handed me the card. I know you took it. I know I scanned the QR code first. Scanning a code does not make you rich." "No," Annie said. "But it made the system record the truth before you could change it." Earl looked at her, surprised and proud. Richard's voice dropped. "Listen to me, girl. You are 18. You have a sick mother. You live in an apartment above a laundromat. Do you really want a legal fight with me?" Annie's face tightened at the mention of her mother. Linda tried to sit up straighter, anger giving her a little strength. Annie said, "I want what I paid for. You want trouble?" "No, sir. You brought trouble with you." Richard exhaled through his nose. "Fine. Here is my final offer. $10,000. Cashier's check by morning. You sign a statement saying there was a misunderstanding, and you waive any claim connected to that ticket." The room went quiet again, but for a different reason. $10,000 sat in Annie's mind like food on a table after days without eating. $10,000 meant Linda could see a specialist. It meant prescriptions, rent, heat, groceries, maybe one full night of sleep. It was more money than Annie had ever held at one time. More than she had seen in months of wiping tables, washing plates, and counting coins under bad light. Richard heard the silence and stepped into it. "For a girl like you," he said, "that is mercy." Linda whispered, "No." Annie looked at her mother. Linda's eyes were wet. Not from fear of losing the money, but from knowing how heavy the offer would feel to her daughter. Earl murmured, "Don't let him dress a leash up as help." Mr. Patel stared at the floor. Annie raised the phone closer. "Mr. Whitmore?" "Yes?" "For a man like you, $5 million still wasn't enough." Richard's answer came fast. "Careful. I am being careful. That's why this call is being recorded." The line went silent. Mr. Patel's mouth opened. Earl almost smiled. Annie continued, "We have the receipt. We have the store footage. We have a witness. We have the QR scan. We have your $50 in an envelope. And now we have you telling Mr. Patel to say the cameras weren't working. Richard said nothing. Linda coughed once, then covered her mouth with the blanket. Annie's hand moved toward her, but Linda waved her off, eyes fixed on the phone. Richard finally spoke. You think that little recording will scare me? No, Annie said. I think it will tell people what happened. You will regret this. Maybe, Annie said. But I would regret selling the truth more. The call ended. For several seconds. Nobody moved. The phone screen went dark in Mr. Patel's hand. Annie stopped the recording and saved it twice, then sent it to her email. While her fingers still shook, Earl let out a breath. Well, that man just talked himself into a corner. Mr. Patel sank into the kitchen chair as if his legs had given up. He will destroy my store. Linda looked at him. Maybe, or maybe for once, he will learn there are rooms his money cannot clean. Annie sat beside the table and wrote down the time of the call. Her handwriting was uneven. The pen left small dents in the paper. Earl pulled out his own phone. I know a woman at the plane dealer. Retired now, but she still knows everybody. Before we call press, we call police. Before police, we make copies. No press, Annie said quickly. Not yet. Earl nodded. Fair. Mr. Patel rubbed both hands over his face. I am sorry, Annie. She looked at him for a long moment. I believe you're sorry. He lifted his head. But sorry doesn't put my ticket back in my hand, she said. So tomorrow, you're going to tell the police exactly what happened. He nodded. I will. And if you get scared? Linda answered for him. Then you tell the truth scared. A faint sound came from Annie, almost a laugh, but tired and close to tears. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. The confirmation message from the prize app had arrived in her inbox. Claimant registered. Annie Carter. Confirmation number attached. She showed it to Linda. Linda touched the screen with one finger. There you are. Annie looked at her name. Not Richards. Not Whitmore Holdings. Not the man who had thrown $50 at a counter and thought the world would move aside. Annie Carter. For the first time that night, the apartment did not feel quite as powerless. Then another message appeared, this one from an unknown number. Miss Carter, this is Gregory Sloan, counsel for Richard Whitmore. Do not speak to law enforcement or any media regarding the ticket dispute. Any false claim may result in legal action. We expect your cooperation. Annie read it once. Then again. Earl stepped closer. What is it? She handed him the phone. He read the message and gave a humorless chuckle. There it is. Suit and tie thunder. Linda held out her hand for the phone. Annie gave it to her. Linda read slowly. Lips pressed together. Baby, she said, handing it back. Tomorrow morning, you do exactly what he told you not to do. Annie looked at the notebook, the receipt, the USB drive, the sealed $50 bill, the saved recording, and the confirmation email. Then she nodded. Tomorrow, she would walk into a police station with everything Richard Whitmore thought she was too poor, too young, and too afraid to keep. By 7 the next morning, Annie had slept less than an hour. She sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open in front of her, checking the same list over and over because fear had a way of making simple things feel slippery. Receipt. USB drive. Confirmation email. Screenshot. Voice recording. Text from Gregory Sloan. Envelope with the $50 bill. Timeline written by hand. Mr. Patel's number. Earl Dawson's number. Linda sat on the couch wrapped in her blue house robe, watching Annie pack everything into a brown folder from an old-school project. The folder had a bent corner and faded marker on the front where Annie had once written biology review in 10th grade. Now it carried the only thing standing between her and a man who thought money could rewrite a room full of witnesses. You don't have to come, Annie said. Linda gave her a look. You think I'm letting you walk into that station alone? You need rest. I need to see you stand up straight. Annie pressed her lips together. Mama. Linda reached for her inhaler, took one slow breath from it, and settled back. I'll sit. I'll breathe. I'll mind my business until someone forgets you have a mother. That almost made Annie smile. Earl arrived at 7:30 in an old pickup with a cracked dashboard and a travel mug in the cup holder. Mr. Patel came 5 minutes later, wearing the same jacket from the night before, his face drawn and his eyes ringed with worry. He held another envelope in his hand. "I printed still images from the footage," he said when Annie opened the door. "The sale. You holding the card." Mr. Whitmore entering. Annie took the envelope. "Thank you." Mr. Patel looked down. "I should have done it right away." "Yes," Annie said, not cruelly. "You should have." Earl cleared his throat. "Everybody ready?" Linda stood slowly. Annie moved to help her, but Linda waved her off. "I can walk to a truck, baby. I'm not made of paper." The police station on Kinsman Road looked plain from the outside, all brick, glass doors, and tired flags moving in the morning wind. Annie had passed it on the bus many times but had never gone inside. The lobby smelled like coffee, floor cleaner, and old paperwork. A man argued quietly at the front desk about a towed car. A woman filled out a form with a pen tied to the counter by a chain. Somewhere behind the glass, a phone rang and rang. Annie held the folder against her chest. At the front desk, an officer looked up. His nameplate read Harris. He was in his 40s, with close-cropped hair and the kind of face that had learned to show little before hearing everything. "What can I do for you?" Annie swallowed. "I need to report a theft." Officer Harris glanced at Linda, then Earl, then Mr. Patel. "What was taken?" "A winning bingo scratch card." His expression changed just a little, not enough to be rude, but enough for Annie to notice. "A scratch card," he repeated. "Yes, sir. And you know it was winning?" "I scanned the QR code from a photo before the man who took it could register it." Now Harris looked at her more carefully. "Start from the beginning." Annie opened the folder with hands that would not stay still. "I wrote it down." He took the first page and read. His eyes moved from the timeline to the receipt, then to the printed still images. When he saw Richard Whitmore's name, he paused. "This says Richard Whitmore." "Yes, sir." "The developer?" Earl said. "That's the one." Officer Harris lifted a hand slightly. "I need her to answer." Annie nodded. "Yes, sir. Richard Whitmore took it from my hand after I paid for it." Harris leaned back in his chair. "Did he offer to buy it from you first?" Annie felt Linda shift beside her. "He asked if there were any left," Annie said. "Mr. Patel told him I bought the last one. Then he took it." Mr. Patel stepped forward. "That is true. I saw it." Harris looked at him. "And you're the store owner?" "Yes. I sold the ticket to Annie, but you accepted $50 from Mr. Whitmore." Mr. Patel's face tightened. "Yes." "For the ticket?" "No, not properly. He put the money on the counter after taking it. I should not have accepted." Officer Harris wrote something down. "That complicates it." Linda spoke before Annie could. "Wrong things are often complicated after folks with money touch them." The officer looked at her. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset." Linda's voice stayed even. "I am not upset. I am paying attention." Annie placed the USB drive on the counter. "There's video. And a receipt. And a recording from last night where Mr. Whitmore told Mr. Patel to say the cameras weren't working." Harris stopped writing. "You recorded him?" "He called Mr. Patel while Mr. Patel was at our apartment. The call was on speaker. I recorded it." "Did you tell him he was being recorded?" "At the end," Earl added, "after he told the store owner to lie." Harris took the USB drive, the receipt, the envelope with the $50 bill, and the printed screenshots. "I'm going to need to review this with a supervisor." Annie's stomach tightened. "Does that mean you believe me?" "It means I'm going to review the evidence." That was not the answer she wanted. It was not unfair, but it felt cold enough to make her fingers ache. They waited on a bench against the wall. Linda's breathing grew rough after 20 minutes, so Annie asked for water. Earl brought back a paper cup from the cooler. Mr. Patel sat with his hands clasped between his knees, whispering what might have been a prayer. Annie's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She showed it to Earl. "Don't answer," he said. A voicemail appeared seconds later, then a text. "Miss Carter, failure to respond will be noted. Mr. Whitmore is prepared to resolve this privately. Public accusations will carry consequences." Annie stared at the message until the words blurred. Linda leaned close. Read it out loud. Annie did. Linda nodded toward the front desk. Give that to the officer, too. Annie stood and walked back to the counter just as Officer Harris returned with another man in a white shirt and tie. The supervisor introduced himself as Lieutenant Brooks. Harris said, Miss Carter, we reviewed the store footage. It supports your statement about the purchase. It also shows Mr. Whitmore removing the card from your hand. Annie's knees weakened. She gripped the edge of the counter. Lieutenant Brooks said, We're not making final determinations about prize ownership here. That will involve the prize commission and possibly civil counsel. But as far as the incident at the store, we're opening a report. A report, Annie repeated. Yes, you'll get a case number. Earl muttered. That's a start. Annie handed over the new text. His lawyer just sent this. Harris read it and passed it to Brooks. Brooks looked at Annie. Do not meet with Mr. Whitmore or his counsel alone. Do not sign anything. Keep copies of everything. If they contact you again, save it. Linda stood with effort. And the ticket? Brooks answered carefully. If Mr. Whitmore has the physical card, the commission may ask him to present it. Your registration and evidence will matter. So will the police report. Annie nodded. But the knot inside her did not loosen. A report was not medicine. A case number was not rent. Evidence was not victory. Not yet. As they stepped outside, Mr. Patel stopped near the doors. Annie, he said, I will go to the commission with you. She looked at him. I will say what happened, he said. No more hiding. Earl put his cap back on. Good, because that man's next move won't be quieter. Annie looked down at the folder in her arms. The paper inside was already creased from how tightly she had held it. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from the Ohio Prize Check Office. Subject, urgent verification required, lucky bingo, grand prize claim. Annie opened it. Her eyes moved across the screen, then stopped. The registered claimant must appear for in-person verification within 48 hours. Physical ticket currently reported in possession of competing party. Linda read over her shoulder and took a slow breath. Earl said, competing party, that's a fancy way to say thief. Annie looked at the police station behind her, then at the street ahead. Richard had the paper card. She had the first scan, the receipt, the footage, the recording, and a case number. It still felt uneven, but it was no longer nothing. She slid the phone into her pocket and held the folder tighter. Then we go to verification, she said. Linda nodded. And this time, he doesn't get to tell the story alone. The verification office sat on the 4th floor of a state building downtown, above a row of government windows where people came to renew licenses, argue about forms, and wait under lights that made everyone look tired. Annie had never been there before. The hallway smelled like copier paper, old carpet, and coffee that had been sitting too long. She walked between Linda and Earl, the brown folder pressed against her ribs. Mr. Patel followed a few steps behind, holding a second envelope with the printed camera stills. Linda had insisted on coming, though every few minutes she stopped to catch her breath. Annie offered her arm each time, and Linda took it without pretending she did not need help. You sure you're okay? Annie asked. No, Linda said, but I'm here. Earl gave a quiet grunt. That's about as honest as anybody gets before 9 in the morning. Annie almost smiled, but the smile disappeared when they reached Suite 412, Ohio Prize Verification Office. Through the glass door, she saw Richard Whitmore already inside. He sat at the end of a long table, one ankle crossed over the other, wearing a dark suit and a face built for boardrooms. Beside him sat Gregory Sloan, his lawyer, with a leather folder, a silver pen, and the kind of calm that charged by the hour. On the table in front of them lay a clear evidence sleeve. Inside it was the bingo ticket. Annie's stomach pulled tight. Linda noticed. Breathe. He has it right there, Annie whispered. And you have what he didn't think to fear. They entered. A woman in a navy jacket stood to greet them. Miss Carter? Yes, ma'am. I'm Denise Caldwell, Senior Claims Officer. This is Mr. Keene from Legal Review. We'll be recording this meeting for internal documentation. She glanced toward Linda and Earl. Please state who is accompanying you. Annie gave their names. Mr. Patel gave his. Earl said, Earl Dawson. Witness. Richard's mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile. Quite a crowd. Annie did not answer. Denise Caldwell gestured to the chairs. We are here to verify a disputed grand prize claim for the Lucky Bingo scratch card, serial number ending in 8,841. Mr. Whitmore has presented the physical ticket. Miss Carter is the first verified digital registrant. We will review both. Gregory Sloan opened his folder. Before we begin, my client maintains that he lawfully purchased the ticket from the merchant for $50. Annie's eyes moved to Mr. Patel. Mr. Patel swallowed. No, he gave me $50 after Annie already paid and after he took the ticket. Richard turned his head slowly. Careful, Earl said. There it is again. Denise raised a hand. Mr. Dawson, please. Everyone will have a chance to speak. Gregory's voice stayed smooth. Mr. Patel, did you accept the $50? Yes. Did you return Miss Carter's $1.30? I tried to. So there was a refund? No, Annie said before she could stop herself. There was a betrayal. The room went quiet. Denise looked at her, not unkindly. Miss Carter, you'll have your turn. Annie nodded and gripped the folder under the table. Gregory continued. The merchant accepted payment from Mr. Whitmore. The physical ticket was then retained by Mr. Whitmore. My client later discovered a registration had been submitted by Miss Carter using a photo of the ticket. We believe that registration was improper. Linda spoke from beside Annie. Improper is a rich word for fast. Gregory glanced at her. Ma'am, I understand this is emotional. Linda's voice stayed low. You don't understand anything yet. Annie touched her mother's wrist gently. Linda stopped, though her eyes did not soften. Denise turned to Annie. Miss Carter, please explain how you obtained the image used for registration. Annie opened the folder and took out the printed photo. I took this right after I paid. Before Mr. Whitmore came in, I'd heard you should save the number on tickets, so I took a picture. I didn't know it would matter. Mr. Keene accepted the photo, then compared it with the physical ticket in the evidence sleeve. The QR code and serial number match. Gregory said, no one disputes that she photographed it. The question is whether she had authority to register it after Mr. Whitmore purchased it. Earl muttered, purchased is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Denise gave him a warning look. Earl lifted both hands and went quiet. Annie pulled out the receipt. This is my sale. 7:48 p.m. One Lucky Bingo scratch card. $1.30. Mr. Patel added, I printed it from the register. That is the original transaction. Gregory asked. And where is the refund record? Mr. Patel's face tightened. There is none. I opened the drawer and pushed her money back, but she did not take it. Denise wrote something down. So the first completed register sale is to Miss Carter. Yes, Mr. Patel said. Richard shifted for the first time. This is absurd. I put $50 on the counter. Everyone saw it. Annie looked at him. Everyone saw you take the ticket first. His eyes cut to her. You should have accepted the money. I didn't want your money. You wanted a prize. I wanted what I paid for. Denise's pen paused. She looked toward Officer Harris, who had arrived quietly and taken a seat near the wall. Officer, you have a report? Yes, Harris said. Report includes receipt, witness statements, store footage, and a recorded phone call supplied by Miss Carter. Preliminary review supports that Miss Carter paid first and held the ticket before Mr. Whitmore removed it. Gregory sat straighter. Removed is a loaded word. Officer Harris did not blink. It is the word in the report. Denise asked to see the footage. Mr. Patel handed over the USB drive. A technician loaded it onto a monitor at the end of the room. The video had no sound, but it did not need much. Annie watched herself place the money on the counter, watched Mr. Patel hand over the ticket, watched Richard enter, watched him step toward her, watched her body pull back as his arm moved, watched the ticket leave her hand. Seeing it again made her feel exposed, as if the room had been invited into her humiliation. Linda reached under the table and held her hand. Denise watched the clip twice. Mr. Keene watched it once more, slower. Gregory said, "The angle is incomplete." Mr. Keene replied, "The sequence is clear enough to establish prior purchase and possession by Miss Carter." Richard's face hardened. "Possession? The ticket is right there." He pointed to the sleeve. "With me." Annie turned to him. "Because you wouldn't give it back." For the first time, her voice carried more than pain. It carried the tired courage of a young woman who had been pushed too far and had finally stopped apologizing for standing in the way. Denise looked at the app records next. Digital registration was submitted at 8:13 p.m. by Annie Carter. Confirmation issued at 8:14. Mr. Whitmore attempted code entry at 8:37, and again at 8:39. Both attempts were blocked because the ticket had already been registered. Earl whispered, 23 minutes late. Richard heard him. You think this is funny? No, Earl said. I think it's justice keeping time. Gregory leaned toward Denise. My client is prepared to resolve the matter without further burden on your office. Miss Carter may receive compensation for the inconvenience. Denise looked at Annie. Has any offer been made? Annie opened her phone and showed the text, then mentioned the call. $10,000 if I signed a statement. Mr. Keene asked, do you have the recording? Yes, sir. Annie played the key part. Richard's voice filled the room, telling Mr. Patel to say the cameras were not working, then offering money, then warning her about a legal fight. When it ended, nobody spoke for several seconds. Richard pushed his chair back slightly. That recording was made without my consent. Officer Harris said, Ohio is a one-party consent state. Gregory looked sharply at him. Denise closed her folder. We will complete our formal review. Based on what has been presented today, the office recognizes Annie Carter as the verified claimant, pending final administrative approval. The physical ticket will remain secured here until review is complete. Annie heard the words, but her mind caught on only one part. Verified claimant. Linda squeezed her hand so hard it hurt. Richard stood. This is not over. Annie rose too, slower. Her knees felt weak, but her voice came out clear. It was over when you took something from a girl who had already paid for it, she said. You just needed the paperwork to catch up. Richard looked as if he wanted to answer, but Denise stepped between them with the calm of someone used to stopping powerful people from making records worse. Mr. Whitmore, your counsel can address further objections in writing. Gregory touched Richard's sleeve. We should go. Richard left first. Gregory followed, carrying the leather folder, but not the ticket. The clear evidence sleeve stayed on the table. For the first time since Maple Corner Grocery, Richard Whitmore walked out of a room without the thing he came to claim. Annie sat down again because standing had taken everything she had. Linda looked at her daughter and gave a tired, proud smile. See, she said, truth may walk slow, but it still knows the address. Annie stayed seated after Richard left because her legs would not quite trust the floor. The room had gone quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar. Not safe, not finished, but no longer ruled by his voice. The ticket was still on the table in its clear sleeve, and for the first time it was not in Richard Whitmore's pocket. Denise Caldwell gathered the documents with care. Miss Carter, final administrative approval may take several days. Because there is a competing claim, we have to complete the review properly. Annie nodded, though the words several days landed hard. Several days meant more medicine rationed, more calls from bill collectors, more watching Linda pretend not to be in pain. Denise seemed to understand. I know waiting is difficult. Do not sign anything from Mr. Whitmore or his attorney. If anyone contacts you, save it and forward it to our office. You'll receive instructions by email before close of business. Can she get any emergency advance? Linda asked. Mr. Keene answered gently but firmly. Not until the claim is cleared. Linda's face tightened, but she gave one nod. Rules are always quick to hold back help. Denise did not argue. Sometimes they also keep powerful people from walking out with what isn't theirs. That was enough to make Linda quiet. Officer Harris approached as Annie put the folder back together. Miss Carter, I'll add today's information to the report. If Mr. Whitmore or his counsel threatens you again, contact me directly. He handed her a card. Annie took it. Thank you. He paused. Yesterday, when you first came in, I didn't listen as well as I should have. Annie looked at him. She could have said it was fine, the way people expected young women to smooth over uncomfortable truth. But it was not fine. No, sir, she said. You didn't. Harris accepted that without defending himself. I'll do better. Linda gave him a tired look. Start with the next girl who walks in without a man in a suit behind her. Harris looked down once, then back at her. Yes, ma'am. Earl drove them home. Mr. Patel rode in the back, silent, his hands folded around the envelope of still images he no longer needed. Nobody spoke much on the ride. Cleveland moved past the windows in morning traffic. Corner churches with letterboards, brick storefronts, bus shelters. A man pushing a cart of scrap metal, a woman in scrubs crossing fast with coffee in one hand. Life went on with rude confidence, as if Annie's whole world had not shifted between a grocery counter and a government table. At the apartment, Linda refused to lie down until Annie made tea. Not for me, she said. For you. Your hands are still shaking. They're not. Linda raised one eyebrow. Annie looked down. Her fingers were shaking around the mug. Earl stayed long enough to carry a chair from the kitchen to the couch, so Linda could put her feet up. Mr. Patel stood near the door like a man waiting for a sentence. I should go back to the store, he said. Annie nodded. Okay. He took one step, then stopped. If people come asking questions, what do you want me to say? The truth, Linda said. Annie looked at him. Say I paid first. Say he took it. Say you were wrong to keep the 50. Mr. Patel flinched at the last part, then nodded. I will. Earl walked him to the hallway. Before leaving, Earl turned back to Annie. You did good today. I almost couldn't talk. But you did. I was scared. Most honest people are, Earl said. Crooked folks get confidence for free. After they left, the apartment settled into its usual sounds. The laundromat machines below. The old pipe in the kitchen wall. Linda's breathing. Uneven but present. Annie sat at the table and opened her email every few minutes, though she knew Denise had said later. By mid-afternoon, the story began to leak. It started with a short post from someone who had been near the verification office, then a blurry photo of Richard leaving without the ticket. Then a local online page wrote, Dispute. Over $5 million bingo ticket involves Cleveland developer Richard Whitmore. By 4 o'clock, Annie's phone buzzed so often she had to turn off notifications. Some messages were kind. Working people she did not know wrote that they believed her. A retired nurse said she hoped Linda got her medicine. A waitress from Akron wrote, I've had men throw money at a counter and think that made them decent. Don't let him scare you. But other messages cut deeper. Why buy a bingo card if your mother is sick? Sounds like a scam. People like her always want something free. Annie read one too many and put the phone face down. Linda watched from the couch. Don't drink poison just because somebody left the cup near you. Annie rubbed her eyes. They don't know anything. No. But they like the sound of their own judgment. They keep saying I shouldn't have bought the ticket. Linda was quiet for a moment. Maybe you shouldn't have had to. Annie looked at her. Linda continued. There's a difference. Folks love judging the last choice a poor person makes. They don't ask about the 100 choices that disappeared before it. Annie's throat tightened. I was going to buy you soup. I know. I keep thinking maybe if I had just done that, none of this would have happened. Linda reached for her hand. And I keep thinking, if that man had not taken what was in your hand, none of this would have happened. Don't carry his wrong for him. A knock came at the door late in the afternoon. Annie stiffened, but it was Mabel from the diner, standing in the hallway with a brown paper bag and her work apron still tied around her waist. She was in her early 60s, short, stern, and kind in a way that never asked permission. I heard enough to know you two need food, Mabel said. Annie stepped aside. Miss Mabel, I can't. You can say thank you and move. Inside the bag were chicken noodle soup, cornbread, oranges, tea bags, and 2 wrapped slices of apple pie from the diner. Linda looked at the food, then at Mabel. You didn't have to do this. I know. That's what makes it a gift. Mabel set the bag on the counter. And before you argue, I've been feeding stubborn women longer than Annie's been alive. Annie gave a small laugh, but it broke halfway. Mabel noticed. She softened. Come here, baby. Annie hesitated, then stepped into Mabel's arms. For one brief moment, she let herself be held by someone who did not need evidence, a case number, or a confirmation email to believe she had been hurt. Mabel patted her back. Poor folks get judged for hoping and judged for giving up. So you might as well stand for the truth. Annie pulled back and wiped her face. Everybody's talking. Then talk back when you're ready. Not angry, not begging, just plain. I don't know what to say. Mabel glanced at the cracked phone on the table. Say what happened. That evening, after Linda ate half a bowl of soup and managed to keep it down, Annie sat by the kitchen window with her phone propped against a mug. She did not put on makeup. She did not change clothes. She pressed record before she could lose courage. My name is Annie Carter, she said. Her voice shook, but she kept going. Last night I bought a bingo scratch card at Maple Corner Grocery for $1.30. It was the last money I had. A man named Richard Whitmore took the ticket from my hand after I paid for it. I had taken a picture first. That picture let me scan the QR code, and the app registered the claim in my name. She paused, breathing through the fear. I did not ask for his money. I did not sell him my ticket. I am not ashamed of being poor. And I am not ashamed that I hoped for something better. I only want what I paid for, and I want people to understand that throwing money at a counter does not make taking something right. She ended the video before she could overthink it. Linda nodded once. Send it. Annie posted it. Within minutes, the comments began again. But this time, buried between the noise, were voices that sounded like hands reaching back. I believe her. That happened to my sister once. Keep going, Annie. Truth keeps receipts. Annie read that last line twice. Then she looked toward her mother, asleep at last under the blanket. And for the first time all day, she let herself believe that maybe the truth had not only survived, maybe it had started walking. By morning, Annie's video had traveled farther than she had ever been. She woke in the chair beside the kitchen table with her cheek pressed against her folded arm and her phone buzzing under a stack of mail. For a few seconds, she forgot why her neck hurt, why the room felt too bright, why her mother was asleep on the couch instead of in bed. Then, she saw the screen. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments, dozens of missed calls from numbers she did not know. Annie sat up too fast, and the chair scraped the floor. Linda stirred under the blanket. What time is it? Linda asked. 6:20. You sleep at all? A little. Linda looked toward the phone. That thing still carrying the whole town? Feels like it. Annie opened the notifications with a tight feeling in her stomach. The kind messages were still there, but so were the ugly ones. People had taken pieces of her video and turned them into whatever they wanted. Some used her face with captions. Some circled her work shirt like it proved something. Some asked why a black girl with a sick mother would spend her last money on a bingo card. Others said Richard Whitmore was being attacked because he was rich, as if rich men had become the fragile ones overnight. Then she saw the article. It came from a local business blog, not a major newspaper, but the headline was sharp enough to cut. Teen claimant. In $5 million bingo dispute admits spending last money on gambling, while mother needed care. Annie read it once, then again. The article never said Richard had taken the ticket from her hand. It called the moment a confused exchange. It called Mr. Patel's $50 payment a possible second transaction. It quoted an unnamed source close to Whitmore Holdings, who described Annie as emotionally overwhelmed and misinformed about how prize claims work. Linda held out her hand. Give it here. Annie did not want to, but she passed the phone over. Linda read slowly. Her face did not change much, but Annie saw the muscles tighten near her jaw. They left out the taking, Linda said. Yes. They left out the call. Yes. They left out the part where the office already called you the verified claimant. Annie nodded. Linda handed the phone back. That's not a story. That's a suit with ink on it. Annie tried to breathe through the anger, but shame came with it. Quiet and familiar. Maybe I shouldn't have said it was my last money. Why? Because now they're using it like I'm stupid. Linda pushed the blanket aside and sat up slowly. Baby, people who want to shame you don't need much. If you had bought soup, they would ask why it wasn't cheaper. If you had walked home hungry, they would ask why you didn't plan better. Don't help them punish you for telling the truth. A hard knock sounded at the door. Annie froze. Linda reached for her inhaler, not because she needed it that second, but because fear had gone into her lungs. Who is it? Annie called. Courrier. Annie opened the door with the chain on. A young man in a delivery jacket held out a legal envelope. Annie Carter? Yes. Sign here. She signed. The man left without looking at her twice. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with the names Sloan and Doherty printed in black at the top. Annie carried it to the table as if it might burn through her hand. Linda said, "Open it." Inside was a letter from Gregory Sloan. It accused Annie of making false public statements, interfering with a lawful prize claim, damaging Richard Whitmore's reputation, and using an unauthorized recording to threaten his client. It demanded she remove her video, stop speaking publicly, and appear at a private meeting that afternoon to discuss a reasonable resolution. At the bottom, one sentence stood alone. "Failure to cooperate may expose you to civil liability." Annie read the words twice before they made sense. Civil liability. She did not know exactly what it meant, but she knew what it was meant to do. It was meant to make the room shrink. It was meant to make the folder of evidence feel too small. It was meant to make her think about courtrooms, lawyers, fees, and her mother's medicine until $10,000 looked less like a leash and more like a door. Linda took the letter from her. "They want you scared before you finish breakfast. It's working. Good. Then we know you're awake." "Mama." Linda reached for her hand. "Call Officer Harris. Call Miss Caldwell. Do not call that lawyer. Do not meet him alone." Annie nodded, but her fingers hesitated over the phone. "What if they really can sue me? Folks can sue over anything. Doesn't make them right. What if I lose?" Linda looked at her for a long moment. "Then we lose standing up. But we do not crawl because a rich man mailed us expensive paper." Annie called Officer Harris first. He answered on the third ring. "Miss Carter? I got a letter from Mr. Whitmore's lawyer. Take a picture of every page and send it to me. Then send it to the claims office. Do not go to any private meeting. He says I'm damaging Mr. Whitmore's reputation." Harris was quiet for half a second. "Mr. Whitmore may have done some of that himself." The line was dry enough that Annie almost laughed. After she sent the photos, she called Denise Caldwell's office and left a message. Then she emailed copies to the address from the verification notice. She was still typing when her phone rang again. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call. Then another. By the fifth call, Linda said, "Turn it off for 10 minutes. "I can't. What if the office calls? Then 10 minutes won't end the world." Annie set the phone face down but did not turn it off. She stood and went to the tiny kitchen area. Mabel's soup sat in the fridge. Annie warmed some in a small pot, stirring it carefully because doing one ordinary thing made her feel less like she was being hunted by people with letterhead. Linda came to the table with the legal letter and Annie's notebook. "Write down today's date. Write that the letter arrived by courier. Write the time. Keep the envelope." Annie looked at her. "You should have been a lawyer." Linda gave a tired smile. "I was a black woman working hospital laundry. I learned evidence before I learned rest." Someone knocked again. This time Annie did not move. Linda did not either. The knock came softer. "Annie?" "It's Mabel." Annie opened the door. Mabel stepped in wearing her diner coat, carrying a newspaper folded under one arm and a paper bag in the other. Her face said she had already read enough. "I saw that mess online," Mabel said. "First thing, eat. Second thing, don't read comments on an empty stomach. Third thing, Earl's outside." "Why?" "He says some folks from a local station are parked near the corner. He's making sure nobody comes up here bothering Linda." Annie's eyes filled before she could stop them. Mabel set the bag down. "Don't start crying before coffee, honey. It upsets the order of things." Linda gave a small cough that almost became a laugh. Mabel looked at the legal letter on the table. "That from the rich man's mouthpiece?" Annie nodded. Mabel read the first page, snorted, and dropped it back down. "Paper bully. He wants me to take down the video. Of course he does. A truth with your face on it is harder to bury." Annie sat down. "I'm tired. I know. I'm scared. I know that too. I just wanted medicine for my mother. I didn't ask for all this." Mabel pulled out a chair and sat across from her. For once, her voice lost its diner sharpness. "No, baby. You asked for a ticket you bought. He turned it into all this because he thought nobody would defend you, including you." Annie looked at the phone. Notifications kept lighting the screen. Mabel leaned closer. "Listen to me. Today they're going to make you feel like your poverty is the crime. Don't let them. The crime is a man taking what wasn't his and thinking $50 could baptize it clean." The phone rang again. This time the screen showed Denise Caldwell's office. Annie answered at once. "Miss Carter," Denise said. "We received the letter. Our legal department is aware. I also wanted you to know final review has been accelerated because of the intimidation concerns." Annie gripped the edge of the table. "What does that mean?" "It means we may have a formal determination sooner than expected, possibly tomorrow." "Tomorrow." Annie closed her eyes. Denise continued. "Until then, keep everything. Speak carefully. Tell the truth. And Miss Carter?" "Yes, ma'am?" "Do not let them make you feel like you are the one who has to hide." When the call ended, Annie sat very still. Linda reached across the table and touched the legal letter with one finger. "Justice is not always fair," she said. "Sometimes it asks the tired person to stand up one more time." Annie looked at her mother, then at Mabel, then at the notebook, the folder, the coffee going cold. The letter meant to scare her into silence. "One more time," Annie said quietly, and this time, the words sounded less like fear and more like a promise. The next morning did not arrive gently. It came through the apartment window in a pale strip of light across the kitchen table, landing on the folder, the legal letter, the notebook, and Annie's phone, which had buzzed so many times overnight that she had finally wrapped it in a dish towel to dull the sound. She woke to Linda moving around the kitchen. "Mama?" Annie sat up from the couch, stiff from sleeping half curled under her coat. "What are you doing?" Linda stood at the counter in her robe, one hand braced near the sink, the other lowering 2 slices of bread into the toaster. "Making breakfast." "You should be resting." "I am making toast, not building a bridge." Annie got up too fast, and her head swam. Linda noticed but said nothing. That was mercy in their house. Sometimes you let a person pretend to be stronger than they felt. The toaster clicked. Linda put the toast on a chipped plate and spread the last thin line of peanut butter across both pieces. She handed one to Annie. "Eat." "I'm not hungry." "Neither am I." "Eat anyway." Annie took the toast. It felt wrong to chew while her stomach was tied into knots, but she did it because Linda watched until she swallowed. At 8:15, Denise Caldwell called. Annie answered on speaker so Linda could hear. "Miss Carter," Denise said. "We have scheduled a final determination meeting for noon today. Because of the evidence submitted and the outside pressure being applied, our legal review wants all parties present. Mr. Whitmore and his counsel have been notified." Annie gripped the edge of the counter. "Today?" "Yes. Bring your identification, the police report number, and all original materials. The physical ticket remains secured in our office." Linda closed her eyes for a second, as if thanking God quietly without making a display of it. Denise continued. "You may bring witnesses, but the room will be limited. Mr. Patel and Mr. Dawson are already listed. Officer Harris may attend if available. I strongly recommend you do not speak to anyone outside the building before the meeting." "Yes, ma'am," Annie said. "And Miss Carter?" "Yes. Expect them to push hard. That does not mean they are winning." After the call ended, Annie sat down slowly. Linda looked at her. "Noon. That's 4 hours. Then we use 4 hours." They made copies at the laundromat office downstairs because the owner, Mrs. Alvarez, kept an old printer beside the detergent shelves for customers who needed forms. She was in her late 60s, with silver hair pinned back and glasses on a chain. She had already heard enough from Mabel to know not to ask too many questions. "You need 3 copies or 10? Mrs. Alvarez asked. Annie hesitated. "Maybe 10. "Smart girl." The printer groaned through each page. Receipt, screenshots, confirmation email, Gregory Sloane's letter, text messages, the handwritten timeline, still photos from the store camera. Mrs. Alvarez stacked them neatly, tapped the edges against the counter, and slipped them into a yellow envelope. "No charge," she said. Annie reached for her pocket. "I can't let you." "You can, and you will." Mrs. Alvarez gave her a look over the top of her glasses. "When I came to Cleveland, a woman at the bus station bought me coffee because I looked lost. I remember it 40 years later. Let old people pay back old kindness." Linda, standing beside the dryers, nodded. "Take the envelope, Annie." Annie took it. "Thank you, ma'am." Mrs. Alvarez touched her arm. "Hold your head level. Not high, not low, level. That bothers people who expect you to bend." By 10:30, Earl's pickup was waiting outside. Mabel had come too, carrying a thermos of coffee and wearing a navy coat over her diner uniform. Mr. Patel arrived from the store with his own folder hugged to his chest. "I closed for the day," he said before anyone asked. Earl looked at him. "That must have hurt." "It did," Mr. Patel said. "But not as much as lying again would." No one praised him. Annie was grateful, but gratitude did not erase the night before. Mr. Patel seemed to understand that. The ride downtown felt longer than it should have. Earl drove carefully, both hands on the wheel, while Mabel sat beside him and muttered about traffic. Annie and Linda sat in the back with Mr. Patel. Linda's breathing had a rough edge, but her posture stayed straight. At a red light, Annie's phone rang. Gregory Sloan. Everyone saw the name. "Don't answer," Mabel said. Annie let it ring out. A voicemail appeared. Then a text. "Miss Carter, today's meeting can still be avoided. My client remains willing to provide a generous private settlement. Public proceedings may not end as you hope." Annie showed it to Linda. Linda read it and handed the phone back. "Forward it to Denise." Annie did. Earl glanced in the rearview mirror. "He sounds nervous." "He sounds rich," Mabel said. "Rich and nervous wear the same shoes." At the State Building, 2 reporters stood near the entrance. One held a microphone. Another had a camera resting against his shoulder. Annie stopped walking. Mabel stepped close. "You don't owe them your face." Linda took Annie's hand. In through the side. Earl led them around to a smaller entrance used by employees and deliveries. Officer Harris was waiting there. "Miss Carter," he said. "Miss Caldwell asked me to bring you up this way." Annie let out a breath she had not known she was holding. "Thank you." Harris looked at Linda. "Ma'am, there's a chair near the elevator if you need a minute." Linda gave him a measured look. "I need a fair room more than a chair." "Yes, ma'am," he said, and this time there was no defensiveness in it. Upstairs, the hallway outside Suite 412 was busier than before. 2 staff members moved in and out with folders. A security guard stood near the door. Annie could hear voices inside, one of them Richard's, controlled but sharp. Denise came out to meet them. "We're almost ready." "Miss Carter, before we begin, I need to confirm one thing. Have you received any additional contact from Mr. Whitmore's side since yesterday?" Annie handed her phone over with the new text open. "This morning." Denise read it, then passed it to Mr. Keene, who had appeared beside her. He sighed. "Add it to the file." Annie's pulse quickened. "Is that bad?" Mr. Keene looked at her. "For you?" "No." The door opened wider. Richard Whitmore sat in the same chair as before. Gregory Sloan sat beside him, but his expression was tighter now. The clear sleeve with the bingo ticket lay in front of Denise's seat, no longer near Richard. That small change gave Annie strength. Everyone took their places. Denise started the recorder. "This is the final administrative determination meeting regarding Lucky Bingo scratch card serial number ending 8841. Present are claimant Annie Carter. Witness Mr. Annie Carter, 2M. I. Patel. Witness Earl Dawson, Officer Daniel Harris, Mr. Richard Whitmore, and Counsel Gregory Sloan." Richard interrupted. "I object to being named as though I'm on trial." Denise looked at him. "This is not a trial. It is a prize determination. Your objection is noted." Gregory placed a document on the table. "Before any conclusion is made, we submit that Mr. Whitmore gave consideration for the ticket and took possession with the merchant's acceptance." Mr. Keene glanced at the paper. After the merchant had already completed sale to Miss Carter, Gregory said, "The so-called first sale was reversed." Mr. Patel spoke before Annie could. "No. I tried to return her money after Mr. Whitmore took the ticket. She did not accept it. The register was never reversed." Richard turned on him. "You seem pleased enough with my $50. Mr. Patel's face flushed. "I was wrong to take it. That does not make you right to take the ticket." The room stilled. Earl leaned back, satisfied. About time, Denise reviewed the evidence aloud. Piece by piece. The original receipt. The video footage. The photo taken before Richard entered. The QR scan. The registration timestamp. The blocked attempts from Richard's side. The police report. The recorded call. The legal letter. The settlement texts. Each item sounded small on its own. Together, they became a wall. Gregory tried to interrupt twice. Denise let him speak, then returned to the record. Richard's face grew harder with every page. Finally, Mr. Keene read the legal finding. The office determines that Annie Carter completed the initial purchase of the ticket, retained lawful possession at the time the ticket image was captured, and submitted the first verified digital registration. Subsequent physical control of the ticket by Richard Whitmore does not override the completed sale, supporting evidence, or registration record. Annie's hands went cold. Denise looked directly at her. Therefore, pending standard tax processing and identity verification, the grand prize claim is awarded to Annie Carter. Linda made a sound beside her, soft and broken. Mabel covered her mouth. Earl bowed his head. Mr. Patel let out a long breath. Annie did not move. The words had entered the room, but they had not yet reached the part of her that still expected loss. Richard stood so quickly his chair scraped the floor. This is outrageous. Denise stopped the recorder. Mr. Whitmore, further appeal instructions will be provided to your counsel. Richard looked at Annie. You think this makes you someone? Annie stood then. Not because she felt brave, but because sitting under that sentence would have felt like handing him one last piece of herself. No, she said. It just proves I already was. For once, Richard had no quick answer. Linda reached for Annie's hand under the table. Annie held it and finally let herself breathe. Richard left the room before anyone else did. Gregory Sloane followed him with a tight face and a stack of papers that suddenly looked heavier than leather and ink had any right to be. The door closed behind them, and for a few seconds, everyone remained still, as if the room itself needed time to understand what had just happened. Annie was still standing, her hand in Linda's. The words kept moving through her mind. The grand prize claim is awarded to Annie Carter. Not maybe. Not under review. Not depending on what Richard wanted. Awarded. Linda squeezed her hand again. Baby. Annie turned. Her mother's eyes were wet. That did it. Annie had held herself together through the store, the phone call, the police station, the comments, the legal letter, and Richard's voice trying to grind her down. But her mother's face, tired and proud and still standing beside her, broke the last piece of restraint. Annie stepped into Linda's arms carefully, mindful of her breathing, and cried against her shoulder. Linda held her as long as she could. All right, she whispered. All right now. Let it out, but don't fall apart on me. We still got forms. A shaky laugh came out of Annie through the tears. Mabel wiped her own eyes with the back of her hand and looked away like she was irritated at the room for making her emotional. Earl stood near the wall with his cap pressed to his chest. Mr. Patel sat with both hands over his face. Denise Caldwell gave Annie a moment before speaking. Miss Carter, I know this is a lot. We need to go over the next steps. Annie pulled back and nodded. Yes, ma'am. You'll sign the claim acknowledgement today. Payment processing will begin after tax, withholding forms and identity verification. Because the amount is large, you'll need to choose between payment options. We strongly recommend you speak with a financial advisor and an attorney who is not connected to any party in this dispute. Earl raised a finger. That part matters, Mabel said. She's not signing anything without somebody decent reading it. Denise nodded. Good. I can give you a list of independent legal aid and financial counseling resources. We don't endorse private advisors, but we can point you toward nonprofit services that help new claimants avoid predatory offers. Annie looked at her. Predatory offers? Mabel snorted. Honey, by sunset you'll have cousins you never met and investment experts who spell your name wrong. Denise's expression stayed serious. She's right. Do not respond to strangers asking for money. Do not post your address. Do not make large transfers. Do not pay anyone who promises faster access to the prize. The official process goes through this office only. Linda sat down slowly. Annie noticed the strain in her face and pulled a chair closer. Mama, sit. I am sitting. You know what I mean. Linda waved her off, but she did not argue. That worried Annie more than any cough. Mr. Keene placed a packet in front of Annie. This includes your claimant rights, tax information, appeal window, and security guidance. Mr. Whitmore may attempt an administrative appeal, but given the evidence reviewed today, the finding is strong. Annie's stomach tightened. So he can still fight? He can file, Mr. Keene said. Filing is not the same as winning. Linda looked at him. Will filing stop the money? It may delay final release if the appeal is accepted for review, but the ticket remains secured, and the claim remains in Miss Carter's name unless overturned. Based on the record, that would be difficult. Difficult was not impossible, and Annie heard the difference. But she also heard something else. Richard no longer held the center of the room. Officer Harris stepped closer. Miss Carter, I'll update the theft report with today's determination. The prosecutor may review whether there's enough for charges related to the taking or the attempted interference. Will he be arrested? Annie asked. Harris chose his words carefully. I can't promise that. Cases involving property disputes and claims get complicated. But the report is no longer just your word against his. Annie nodded. She had learned that justice did not always look like people imagined. Sometimes it was not handcuffs or a speech or someone begging forgiveness. Sometimes it was a record that could not be erased. They finished the paperwork slowly. Annie signed where Denise pointed, stopping each time to read before writing her name. Her signature looked nervous on the first page, stronger on the next. By the final form, Annie Carter stretched across the line like it had been waiting years to take up that much space. When they stepped out of Suite 412, the hallway was not empty. 2 reporters stood near the elevator. A camera lifted. A woman with a microphone called, Annie, how does it feel to win $5 million after accusing Richard Whitmore? Annie stopped. Linda's hand tightened around her arm. Earl moved half a step forward. But Annie shook her head. She did not want to talk. She wanted to take her mother home. She wanted soup, quiet, a doctor's appointment, and 1 hour without anyone turning her pain into a headline. But the question had been shaped wrong, and silence would let it stand. She faced the reporter. I didn't win because I accused anybody, Annie said. I won because I paid for a ticket, kept proof, and told the truth. Another reporter asked, do you regret spending your last $1.30 on a bingo card? The question hit the same bruise everyone had been pressing. Annie breathed in. Linda's words came back to her. Stand straight. Not because they're watching. Because you know who you are. I regret that people like my mother can work for years and still end up choosing between medicine and groceries, Annie said. I regret that a man with more money than he could ever need thought he had the right to take from someone with less. But no, I don't regret hoping for 1 second that life might change. Mabel whispered, that's it, baby. The reporter lowered the microphone a little. Annie continued, softer now. And I want to say something else. Being poor does not make a person careless. Sometimes it means every choice hurts, and people who have never had to count coins should be careful how they judge the ones who do. No one threw another question fast enough to catch her. Earl guided them toward the elevator. Officer Harris held the door until they were inside. As the doors closed, Linda let out a long breath. You all right? Annie asked. Linda looked at her daughter. I was about to ask you the same thing. I don't know yet. That's honest. Downstairs, they used the side exit again. Earl's truck was waiting at the curb. Mr. Patel paused before getting in. Annie, he said, I know this does not fix what I did, but if anyone asks, I will keep telling the truth. Annie looked at him for a long moment. Then keep doing that. He nodded, accepting the smallness of the answer. On the ride back, Cleveland looked different and exactly the same. People waited for buses. A man swept the sidewalk in front of a barber shop. A woman carried laundry in a plastic basket. Cars stopped and started. Life did not pause just because Annie's name had been written onto a $5 million claim. At the apartment, Linda was too tired to climb the stairs without stopping twice. Annie stayed close but did not rush her. When they finally reached the door, Linda leaned against the frame and closed her eyes. Mama? Linda opened them. I'm here. Annie unlocked the door, and the small apartment waited inside. The couch, the old table, the bills, the empty pharmacy bag, the toast plate from morning. Nothing had changed yet. Not the heat, not the fridge, not the medicine bottle, but Annie placed the claim packet on the table beside the bills, and for the first time, the papers that promised help outweighed the papers that demanded payment. Linda touched the packet, then Annie's cheek. For the first time in a long time, she said, I think tomorrow might come lighter. Annie covered her mother's hand with her own. Outside, her phone began buzzing again. but she did not pick it up. Not yet. For one quiet minute, she let the world wait. By evening, the apartment had filled with the kind of silence that comes after too many voices. Annie sat at the kitchen table with the claim packet open, reading the same paragraph about tax withholding for the third time without understanding it. Linda had fallen asleep on the couch, one hand resting near the empty pharmacy bag, as if her body remembered worry, even when her mind finally let go. The phone kept lighting up beside Annie's elbow. Calls, messages, news alerts, people asking for interviews, people offering help. People asking for money already, as if the prize had landed in Annie's bank account the moment Denise said her name. It had not. The money was still paperwork. The medicine was still almost gone. The rent was still late. The refrigerator still held half a bowl of soup, 2 oranges, and a carton of milk that needed to be used by Friday. Annie turned the phone face down. A knock came at the door. She froze, then looked toward Linda. Her mother did not wake. Annie crossed the room quietly and checked through the peephole. It was Mabel. Annie opened the door. Mabel stepped in carrying a grocery bag in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. "Before you say anything," Mabel said, "this is not charity. This is dinner." Annie gave a tired smile. "That sounds a lot like charity with better shoes. It's chicken, rice, green beans, and 2 pieces of pie. Call it whatever helps you eat." Mabel set the bag on the counter and looked at Linda sleeping on the couch, her voice lowered. "How's she doing?" "Tired. She tried not to show it all day. She's a mother. That's half the job description." Annie pulled out the containers. The smell of warm chicken and gravy filled the kitchen, and only then did her stomach remind her it had been living on toast and fear. Mabel placed the newspaper on the table. The front page of the local section had Richard Whitmore's name in bold print. Annie did not reach for it. "That bad?" she asked. "Depends who's reading." Mabel tapped the article. "They mention the office awarded you the claim. They mention the footage. They mention the recording, too." Annie looked up. "They played it?" "Not all of it. Enough." The phone buzzed again. Annie ignored it. Mabel watched her for a moment. "You know what happens now, right? I get forms. You get attention. Some of it kind. Some of it hungry. Folks who never called before will suddenly remember your number. People will tell you what to buy, where to live, who to trust, who to forgive. Half of them will say, God sent them. The other half will say they knew your mama back when. Don't rush with any of them." Annie sat down. "I don't even have the money yet. That won't stop people from spending it for you in their heads." Linda stirred on the couch. "Mabel? Right here, Linda. Did you bring pie?" Mabel smiled. "Of course I brought pie. I'm not uncivilized." Linda slowly sat up. Annie moved to help her, but Linda lifted a hand. "Give me a second." Mabel fixed a small plate and brought it over. Linda accepted it with both hands. "You heard the news?" Mabel asked. Linda nodded. "Annie told me. I mean the other news." Annie looked at her. "What other news?" Mabel unfolded the newspaper and turned it around. Near the bottom of the article, a paragraph said Whitmore Holdings had released a statement denying wrongdoing and announcing that Richard Whitmore would pursue every appropriate remedy against false and damaging claims. Annie felt her chest tighten. "He's still fighting." Linda put her fork down. "Of course he is. Men like that don't lose the first time. They lose slowly, then call it unfair." Mabel sat across from Annie. "The good part is he's not holding the room anymore. The story's out, the evidence is out, and the prize office made its finding. But he can delay it." "Yes," Mabel said. "He can try." Annie rubbed her forehead. "Mama needs medicine now. Not after his pride gets tired." Linda looked at her sharply. "Don't use me to make yourself panic." "I'm not. You are. I've been sick longer than today. We will get through tonight." Annie's voice dropped. "I hate that you have to keep getting through things." Linda's expression softened. "So do I, baby." For a while they ate in quiet. The food was simple, but it felt like something solid under Annie's feet. Afterward, Mabel washed the dishes even though Annie told her not to. Linda kept her plate on her lap, eating slowly, saving the pie for last. At 8:30, the phone rang again. This time the name on the screen made Annie sit straighter. "Denise Caldwell," Annie answered. Hello? Miss Carter, I'm sorry to call after hours, but I wanted you to hear this from me. Mr. Whitmore's counsel has filed notice that they intend to appeal our determination. Annie closed her eyes. Denise continued. That does not reverse the decision. It does not transfer the claim. It does not give him the ticket. It simply triggers a short review period. How short? Up to 10 business days. Though we are requesting expedited handling because of the intimidation record. Annie looked at Linda. 10 business days sounded small to people with savings. It sounded enormous to a kitchen with an empty pharmacy bag. Denise's voice softened. I also spoke with a claimant support coordinator. There may be a non-profit partner that can help with urgent medical expenses while the prize is pending. I can send the information tonight. Annie swallowed. You can do that? I can send information. You would still need to apply. Yes, ma'am. Please. And Miss Carter, do not treat this appeal as a new trial in your mind. The record is strong. After the call ended, Annie repeated the news. Linda listened without interrupting. 10 days, Annie said. Then we count them, Linda answered. Mabel dried her hands on a dish towel. And we call that non-profit first thing. Annie nodded. But the fear sat heavy again. Richard might not win, but he could still make them wait. He could still make every day cost something. Later, after Mabel left and Linda fell asleep again, Annie sat alone at the table. She opened her notebook and turned to a clean page. At the top, she wrote, "What happens next?" Under it, she made a list. Call nonprofit. Call pharmacy. Keep every message. No interviews alone. Find legal help. Ask Denise about appeal timeline. Eat. Make mama eat. Sleep if possible. She stopped at the last line and let out a small breath. Sleep if possible sounded almost funny. Her phone lit up once more. A message from Earl. Saw the paper. Don't let that man rent space in your head for free. I'll drive you wherever tomorrow. Annie typed back. Thank you. Then she opened the photo of the bingo ticket again. The picture was still clear. The QR code. The serial number. Her thumb at the edge. The small proof that had survived a rich man's hand. Linda's voice came softly from the couch. You still up? Yes, ma'am. Come sit with me. Annie moved to the couch and sat on the floor beside it, like she used to when she was younger and Linda braided her hair before school. Linda placed a hand on her shoulder. Today was a win, even if it doesn't feel finished. I know. No, you don't. Not yet. You're still waiting for the world to snatch it back. Annie looked down. Linda's fingers pressed gently. That is what hard years teach you. But sometimes, baby, the door really does open. You still have to walk through careful, but you don't have to apologize for stepping. Annie rested her head against the edge of the couch. I'm so tired, Mama. I know. What if I can't keep doing this? Linda's hand moved slowly over her hair. Then tonight you don't. Tonight you breathe. Tomorrow, we make calls. For once, Annie obeyed. She closed her eyes, listening to her mother's uneven breathing and the machines below the apartment turning someone else's clothes warm and clean. The money had not come yet. Richard had not stopped yet. The bills had not vanished. But Annie's name was on the claim, and for that night, in that small apartment above the laundromat, it was enough to let her rest. Morning came with phone calls. Annie woke on the floor beside the couch, her neck stiff, and one arm numb from where she had used it as a pillow. Linda was still asleep above her, mouth slightly open, breath rough but steady. For a few seconds, Annie did not move. She let herself listen to that sound. It was not easy breathing. It was not healthy breathing. But it was breathing. And for now, that mattered more than every message waiting on her phone. Then the reminder returned. Call nonprofit. Call pharmacy. Keep every message. She rose quietly, washed her face at the kitchen sink, and made coffee weak enough to stretch the grounds one more day. By 8, she was sitting at the table with the notebook open, Denise Caldwell's email on the screen, and the number for the claimant support nonprofit written twice in case her hand shook too much to read it the first time. Linda opened her eyes as Annie dialed. Put it on speaker, Linda said. You just woke up, and I'm already nosy. Annie gave a tired smile and tapped speaker. A woman answered on the fourth ring. Community Bridge Assistance. This is Renee. Annie sat straighter. Hi, ma'am. My name is Annie Carter. Denise Caldwell from the prize office said I should call about urgent medical help while a claim is pending. There was a pause, then the sound of typing. Annie Carter. Yes, I have a note here. I understand there's a verified prize claim, under appeal review. Yes, ma'am. And you have an immediate prescription need for a household member? My mother. She has a lung condition. Her medicine is almost out. Linda mouthed. Tell her all of it. Annie swallowed. She needs an inhaler refill, 2 prescriptions, and a specialist appointment. We've been stretching what she has. Renee's tone changed. Not pity. Focus. Do not stretch breathing medication. I'm going to ask some questions, then we'll see what can be done today. Today, not next week. Annie closed her eyes for half a second. Today, Renee asked about Linda's name, date of birth, pharmacy, doctor, insurance status, income, address, and whether they had transportation. Annie answered each one. When she did not know a number, Linda supplied it from the couch without opening her eyes. Finally, Renee said, "We can issue an emergency pharmacy voucher by noon if the pharmacy confirms the prescriptions. We may also arrange a clinic appointment within 48 hours. It won't solve everything, but it should keep your mother covered while the claim clears." Annie pressed one hand against her mouth. Linda said, "Thank you, Renee." "You're welcome, Miss Carter," Renee said. "And Annie?" "Yes, ma'am. You did the right thing calling. People wait too long because they're ashamed to ask. Medicine is not a luxury." After the call ended, Annie wrote the steps down. Pharmacy call, voucher by noon, clinic appointment, bring ID. Linda leaned back. "See? One call at a time." Annie nodded, but the relief made her shaky. Sometimes help was harder to hold than pain because pain was familiar. Help felt like a chair you were afraid might be pulled away. At 9:30, Earl arrived with Mabel. He carried a paper bag of biscuits from the diner, and Mabel carried her usual no-nonsense face. "Eat first," Mabel said. "We have to go to the pharmacy, and you'll do that better with food in your stomach." Earl set his cap on the table. "Also, you've got people outside." Annie went still. "Reporters? One camera near the corner. 2 folks pretending they're just checking their phones. Could be press. Could be Whitmore's people. Could be plain nosy." Linda muttered. "Nosy has always been the cheapest profession." Mabel looked toward the window. "We'll take the back way through the laundromat." Before they left, Annie checked her email. A new message from Denise Caldwell waited at the top. Appeal review accepted for expedited consideration. Expected determination within 72 hours. Claim remains assigned to Annie Carter pending review. 72 hours, not 10 days. Annie read it aloud. Mabel folded her arms. "Good, that means his scarecrow lawyer didn't get all the time he wanted." Earl nodded. "Still, we stay careful." They left through the laundromat below. Mrs. Alvarez stood behind the counter, pretending to sort quarters while watching the front windows. "Back door is open," she said. "And Annie?" "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Alvarez slid a small envelope across the counter. Inside were bus passes. Annie shook her head. "I can't keep taking things." Mrs. Alvarez's expression did not move. "You are not taking. You are being carried for a few steps. There is a difference." Linda touched Annie's wrist. "Say thank you." Annie did. Earl drove them to the pharmacy on Lee Road. It was the same pharmacy where Annie had stood too many times asking which prescription could wait. The pharmacist, Mr. Kepler, recognized Linda and looked relieved when Annie gave him the voucher information. "This came through from Community Bridge," he said, reading the screen. "It covers the inhaler and both prescriptions today." Annie gripped the counter. "All of it?" "All of it." Linda looked away quickly, but Annie saw her eyes shine. While they waited, Annie walked down the aisle with cough drops, pill organizers, reading glasses, and heating pads. Ordinary things. The kind of things people bought when life was manageable. She picked up a small digital blood pressure monitor, checked the price, and put it back. Mabel saw her. "Soon." Annie gave a small nod. "Soon feels strange. Good strange or bad strange. Like standing at a bus stop and not knowing if the bus is real." Mabel's face softened. "It's real. Still might be late, but it's real. When the pharmacist called Linda's name, Annie paid nothing. The receipt printed with zeros in the amount due. She held it between her fingers and almost laughed. A receipt that did not demand. A receipt that gave. Linda held the pharmacy bag against her chest. In the truck, she opened it and checked each label like she needed proof the medicine would not disappear. For the first time, Linda said quietly, "I don't have to choose which one to skip." Annie turned toward the window. She did not want everyone to see her cry again. Her phone rang before they reached home. "Denise Caldwell," Annie answered. "Hello? Miss Carter, I'm calling with an update. Mr. Whitmore's counsel has submitted an appeal statement claiming merchant transfer and claimant bad faith. Our office has reviewed the submission. We are requesting one additional sworn statement from Mr. Patel and one from Mr. Dawson by tomorrow morning. If submitted, the review can close quickly." Earl, hearing his name, said, "Tell her I'll sign before lunch." Mr. Patel was already waiting outside Maple Corner Grocery when they pulled up, as if he had expected the call too. He held the store door open but did not smile. "I heard from the office," he said. "They need statement." Annie looked at him carefully. "Will you still do it?" He nodded. "Yes, I wrote it last night. My wife read it and said it was too soft, so I wrote it again." Mabel gave a short laugh. "I like your wife." Inside the store, the counter looked the same as it had that night. The gum, the coffee machine, the lottery display. But Annie did not feel the same standing there. Hurt remained, but it no longer had the whole room. Mr. Patel took a folded page from under the register and read it aloud, his voice uneven but clear. "I, Ramesh Patel, sold one lucky bingo scratch card to Annie Carter for $1.30 at 7:48 p.m. Richard Whitmore entered after the sale was complete. He removed the ticket from Miss Carter's hand without her consent. I accepted $50 from him afterward. That was wrong. The ticket had already been sold to Miss Carter. No one spoke. Annie's throat tightened. "Thank you." Mr. Patel lowered the paper. "I cannot undo what I did." "No," Annie said, "but this helps." Earl signed his own statement at the same counter, leaning over slowly because his back bothered him. "I saw the same," he said as he wrote. "And I'll say it in any room they put me in." Annie scanned both statements with her phone and emailed them to Denise before leaving the store. As they stepped outside, a black sedan idled across the street. Not Richard's car, but expensive enough to make everyone notice. A man in a suit sat behind the wheel, phone raised. Earl stepped in front of Annie without making a scene. Mabel said under her breath, "Smile, honey. Let them photograph a girl who isn't hiding." Annie did not smile. She only lifted her chin level, the way Mrs. Alvarez had told her. Her phone buzzed with a reply from Denise. "Received. Review file complete." 3 words. Annie read them twice. For the first time since Richard had walked into the store, there was nothing more for him to take, twist, delay, or demand from her that she had not already answered. The file was complete. Now the truth had to stand on its own. The reply from Denise stayed on Annie's screen all the way back to the apartment. Review file complete. She kept opening it, not because the words had changed, but because she needed to make sure they were still there. Linda sat beside her in Earl's truck with the pharmacy bag in her lap, one hand resting over the labels. Every few minutes, she touched the bag the way someone might touch a locked door after finding the key. When Earl pulled up behind the laundromat, the black sedan from across the street did not follow. Mabel watched the corner anyway before letting Annie help Linda out. "Inside first," Mabel said. "Then you can think." Linda gave a tired smile. "Mabel, you ever let anybody breathe before giving orders?" "Only if they breathe correctly." Upstairs, the apartment felt different, though nothing had moved. The bills were still on the table. The couch still sagged in the middle. The kitchen light still flickered once before settling. But the orange pill bottle was no longer the only answer in the room. Annie set the new prescriptions beside it, lined up by time and dosage the way the pharmacist had explained. Linda sat at the table and watched her. "You're organizing like a nurse already." "I'm organizing because if I don't, I'll forget something." "You don't forget important things." Annie looked at the old bottle. "I forgot to be a normal 18-year-old. Linda's face changed. "Come here." Annie stayed by the counter. "I'm fine." "No, you're busy. That's not the same." Mabel, who was putting groceries into the refrigerator, said, Listen to your mother. I'm bossy, but she outranks me. Annie crossed the small kitchen and sat. Linda took her hand. I hate what you had to carry, Linda said. But don't speak like your life is already spent. You are 18. You are not behind. You are not ruined. You are tired. Annie looked down. I don't know how to stop being tired. One safe day at a time. Before Annie could answer, her phone rang. Denise Caldwell. Everyone went quiet. Annie answered on speaker. Hello? Miss Carter, Denise said. I wanted to inform you before the written notice goes out. The expedited appeal review is complete. Annie's hand tightened around the phone. Denise continued. Mr. Whitmore's appeal has been denied. The original determination stands. You are the approved claimant for the $5 million grand prize. The room went still. Annie heard the refrigerator hum, heard a dryer thump somewhere below, heard Linda draw in a breath that broke halfway. Denise said, there will still be standard tax processing and a scheduled claim release appointment. But the ownership dispute is closed at our level. Mr. Sent, Whitmore may attempt separate civil action, but it will not stop administrative processing unless a court orders otherwise. At this stage, the prize office recognizes you as the winner. Annie pressed her free hand to her chest. Linda whispered, say thank you, baby. Thank you, Annie said. But the words came out thin. Denise's voice softened. You did well keeping records. That mattered. My mother told me to. Then your mother gave good advice. Linda closed her eyes. After Denise explained the next appointment, the tax forms, the need for secure banking, and a list of approved financial counseling referrals, the call ended. No one spoke right away. Mabel put one hand over her mouth. Earl, who had come up with them and stood near the door, took off his cap. Mr. Patel was not there, but Annie thought of him standing behind his counter, finally telling the truth. Linda reached for Annie. This time Annie went to her at once. It's over, Annie whispered. Linda held her carefully. This part is, I won? You were right before they said it. But yes, baby, you won. Annie began to cry, not the sharp crying from fear, but something slower, something that seemed to come from her bones. Mabel turned toward the sink and wiped her eyes with a dish towel, muttering that onions must be hiding somewhere. Earl cleared his throat and looked at the ceiling. That evening, they did not celebrate with anything grand. They ate chicken and rice from Mabel's containers. Linda took her medicine on time. Annie called the pharmacy to confirm the next refill. Earl gave her the name of a retired bank manager from his church who had helped his sister after an insurance settlement. Mabel wrote down 3 rules on a napkin. Don't lend big money in the first year. Don't buy a house before getting advice. Don't let guilt sign checks. Annie taped the napkin to the refrigerator. 2 weeks later, the prize release appointment took place. Annie wore a plain navy dress Mabel found at a thrift store and pressed twice. Linda wore a cream sweater and used a cane she claimed she did not need. Denise met them with a folder, a tax officer, and a security staff member who explained privacy steps. Annie chose the payment structure after speaking with an independent advisor, signed the forms slowly, and opened a protected account at a credit union recommended through the claimant office. The first time she saw the deposit confirmation, she did not feel rich. She felt dizzy. Linda looked at the paper and sat down before Annie had to tell her. $5 million, Mabel said later, when they gathered at the apartment. And this place still smells like dryer sheets. Linda smiled. Good. Let it remember us. Annie's first spending was not a car, not jewelry, not anything anyone online had guessed. It was a pulmonary specialist appointment, paid in advance. Then a full prescription plan, a home air purifier, a better mattress for Linda, and a grocery delivery that filled the refrigerator until Annie stood in front of it and cried because there were eggs, milk, fruit, vegetables, chicken, and 3 kinds of soup. Linda came up beside her. What's wrong? Annie laughed through tears. There's too much food. Linda looked into the refrigerator, then put an arm around her daughter. No, there's finally enough. They paid the rent balance, the electric bill, the clinic debt. A small loan Linda had taken years before and never mentioned until Annie found the notice in a drawer. Annie set aside money for taxes, legal advice, school, and long-term care. She opened a savings account with rules so strict even Mabel approved. Then Annie bought one thing for herself, a pair of sturdy black shoes for work and school. Not expensive, not flashy, just shoes that did not leak, pinch, or make her feet ache. After 6 hours standing at the store, the saleswoman asked if she wanted the receipt emailed or printed. Annie said, "Both, please." Linda laughed from the chair beside her. "Still keeping receipts?" Annie looked at the shoebox in her lap, then at her mother, breathing easier than she had in months. "Always," she said. A week later, a final letter arrived from Gregory Sloane's office. It did not apologize. It did not admit wrongdoing. It stated that Richard Whitmore would not pursue further action at this time. The words were stiff, careful, and empty of grace. Annie read it once and set it on the table. Linda asked, "How does it feel?" Annie thought about Richard's voice in the store. Mr. Patel pushing back her coins. The phone screen at 7%. The room where Denise read the decision. The first bag of medicine covered by the voucher. The refrigerator finally full. "It feels like he still doesn't understand," Annie said. Mabel, sitting by the window with coffee, shrugged. "He doesn't have to understand to lose." That night, Annie placed the printed photo of the bingo ticket in a small frame from the dollar store. She did not frame the prize letter. She did not frame the news article. She framed the picture taken on a cracked phone before anyone knew it mattered. Linda watched her set it on the shelf. "Why that one?" she asked. Annie adjusted the frame until it stood straight. "Because that's the moment before everything got loud," she said. "That's the proof I had before anyone believed me." Linda nodded. "Then keep it where you can see it." Annie looked at the QR code, the serial number, the edge of her own thumb holding on. For once, she did not feel small looking at it. She felt ready. 1 year later, Annie Carter walked into Maple Corner Grocery, carrying a paper bag from the pharmacy in one hand and a box of tea in the other. The bell above the door gave the same tired ring. The coffee machine still sat near the entrance, though Mr. Patel had finally replaced the cracked pot. The old refrigerator hummed along the back wall. The floor had new mats, but the narrow aisles still smelled faintly of canned soup, fresh bread, floor cleaner, and the peppermint candies Mr. Patel kept in a glass jar by the register for older customers who came in just to talk. Annie paused inside the doorway. For a moment, the store became two places at once. The place it was now, quiet on a Saturday morning, sunlight lying across the counter, and the place it had been that night, when Richard Whitmore had taken the last bingo card from her hand and made the whole room feel too small for the truth. She was 19 now. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and she wore the sturdy black shoes she had bought after the prize was released. Not fancy, just strong. She liked the sound they made on the floor. Steady. Sure, the kind of sound a person makes when she no longer apologizes for taking up space. Mr. Patel looked up from behind the register. His face changed when he saw her. Not into the eager smile he had given Richard's $50 bill, but into something quieter. "Annie," he said. "Good morning." "Good morning, Mr. Patel." His eyes moved to the pharmacy bag. "Your mother?" "Better." The specialist changed one of her medications. "She's stubborn about the breathing exercises, but better." From the back aisle, a familiar voice said, "Stubborn is how some women stay alive." Linda Carter came around the corner with a small basket hooked over one arm. She had gained a little weight back. Her face still carried the marks of illness, but the grayness had eased. She moved slower than she wanted to admit, yet she moved without fear of every breath. That was enough for Annie. "Mama, you were supposed to wait in the car." Linda lifted a box of crackers. "And miss watching you stand in this store like you own your spine?" "No, ma'am." Annie gave her a look. "You're impossible. I've been called worse by nurses with clipboards." Mr. Patel laughed softly, then turned serious. "I put something up." He pointed behind the counter. There, above the cigarette display, and beside the lottery machine, hung a small wooden sign with dark letters. "Every customer deserves respect." Annie read it once. Then again. Mr. Patel rubbed his hands together. "My wife said it should be bigger." "She was right," Linda said. Mr. Patel nodded. "She usually is." Annie stepped closer to the counter. "It's good." "No," he said. "It is late." But it is there. She did not rush to comfort him. Some things did not need to be softened. Some apologies were better when they stayed a little uncomfortable. The door opened again, and Earl Dawson came in wearing his Brown's cap and carrying his metal travel mug. He had retired from the bus company 6 months earlier, though he still woke before dawn because his body did not believe retirement was real. "Well, look at this," he said. "The whole neighborhood meeting without inviting me." Linda smiled. "You found us anyway. I always know where the coffee is." Mr. Patel reached for a cup. "Fresh pot." Earl leaned toward Annie. "How's school?" "Hard." "That's not an answer." "It's hard, and I passed my first anatomy exam." Earl pointed at her with the travel mug. "Now that's an answer." Annie had started her nursing program in the fall. She still worked part-time at Mabel's diner, not because she had to, but because Mabel said too much free time made people strange. Annie suspected Mabel just missed having her around. Twice a month, Annie also volunteered at a community clinic that helped working families apply for prescription support, utility aid, and medical appointments they had been putting off too long. She did not tell people she had won $5 million unless she had to. She introduced herself as Annie, a student, someone who knew forms could make a person feel smaller than sickness ever did. Richard Whitmore's name still appeared in the news from time to time, but not the way it used to. A few investors had backed away from Whitmore Holdings after the recording became public. A charity dinner removed him from its program. His company issued statements, then quieter statements, then no statements at all. He did not go broke. Men like Richard rarely lost everything, but he lost something he had spent decades polishing, the easy assumption that rooms would bend for him. One article had called him the billionaire who took a bingo ticket from a teenager. Annie never saved it. She had no interest in framing his shame beside her life. What she kept was the photo. The cracked phone picture of the ticket sat in a small frame on the shelf at home, near Linda's medicine schedule and the napkin where Mabel had written her 3 money rules. Annie looked at it on hard days. Not to remember the prize, but to remember the moment before the world believed her, when the truth was still quiet, and she had held on anyway. Mr. Patel rang up Linda's crackers, the tea, and a bottle of water Annie had picked up without checking the price first. That still felt strange. She paid with a debit card from the credit union. The receipt printed, and Mr. Patel handed it to her. Annie folded it once and put it in her wallet. Earl noticed and grinned. "Still keeping receipts?" "Always." The door opened while they were talking. A young woman stepped in wearing a fast food uniform and a coat too thin for the Cleveland cold. She went straight to the back, picked up a small carton of milk, then stopped near the counter where the bingo scratch cards were displayed. Annie saw her reach into her pocket and count coins against her palm. The young woman's face carried a look Annie knew too well. Not greed, not foolishness, calculation, the painful kind. The kind that asks whether hope can be afforded after bread, bus fare, and medicine. Mr. Patel saw her too. He looked at Annie, then away, as if giving her the choice to ignore it. Annie did not approach the woman. She did not ask questions. She did not turn kindness into a scene. She placed a $20 bill on the counter beside her receipt and kept her voice low. "Whatever she came in for, make sure she leaves with it." Mr. Patel nodded once. "I will." Linda watched her daughter with a soft expression. "You know, helping quiet is still helping. Mabel taught me that. Mabel teaches everybody everything whether they ask or not." Earl took his coffee and opened the door for Linda. "Come on, ladies, before Patel starts charging rent for conversation." Outside, the morning was clear. Cars moved along the street. A bus sighed at the corner. Someone swept the sidewalk in front of the barber shop. The city looked ordinary, which Annie had come to understand was not a small blessing. Ordinary meant her mother had medicine at home. Ordinary meant the lights worked. Ordinary meant the refrigerator had food. Ordinary meant the phone could ring without Annie assuming the worst. Linda walked beside her slowly. Annie matched her pace. "You ever think about that night?" Linda asked. "Every day. Still hurt?" "Some parts." Linda nodded. "That's honest." Annie looked back through the store window. The young woman at the counter was speaking with Mr. Patel now. He was listening. Really listening. With both hands on the counter and no money hidden in his pocket. "I don't think about Richard much," Annie said. "Not the way people expect." "What do you think about?" Annie considered the question. The picture. The battery at 7%. You telling me not to leave the truth sleeping in my hand. Mr. Patel coming back. Earl standing up. Mabel bringing food. Mrs. Alvarez making copies. Denise saying my name in that room. Linda smiled. So you think about people. I think about how close I came to believing I was alone. They reached Earl's truck. Linda touched Annie's cheek the same way she had when Annie was little. You weren't. I know that now. Earl cleared his throat, pretending not to be listening. You two finished making a man emotional in public? Linda gave him a look. Nobody asked you to be soft, Earl. Didn't ask. It happened. They laughed, and the sound moved down the sidewalk like something simple and earned. Before getting into the truck, Annie looked once more at Maple Corner Grocery. The sign above the register was visible from where she stood if she looked carefully. Every customer deserves respect. A year ago, Richard Whitmore had believed that money could turn another person's hope into his property. He had believed a $50 bill could erase $1.30. He had believed a young black woman in a work uniform would cry, bend, and disappear. But truth had kept its own record. Sometimes it is a camera, sometimes it is a witness, sometimes it is a receipt folded into a wallet, sometimes it is a cracked phone in the hands of a tired girl who has almost nothing left except the courage to say, no, this is mine. Annie opened the truck door and helped Linda in. Then she climbed in beside her mother, the pharmacy bag safe between them, and rode home through Cleveland with the quiet knowledge that justice had not made the world perfect. It had simply given her back her name, and this time, she knew how to keep it. The lesson of Annie's story is that dignity should never depend on how much money a person has. Richard Whitmore believed his wealth gave him the right to take what he wanted, but Annie proved that truth can stand even when it comes from someone poor, young, and overlooked. Her cracked phone, her receipt, and her courage became stronger than his money. The story reminds us that justice may not always arrive quickly, but it begins when one person refuses to stay silent. It also teaches that kindness matters most when it protects someone's dignity, not when it puts their pain on display. Most of all, Annie's journey shows that no one is too small to fight for what is right. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.